Chapter 2200. The Peng King's descent. Jianchen and Su Ran returned to the imperial capital of the Thousand-Leaf Empire as quickly as they could. After calling Kaya, the three of them immediately hurried off to the teleportation formation cast down in the imperial capital. Kaya knew that Jianchen's location had probably been exposed along the way, so she also became stern, realizing the severity of the matter. The three of them were silent along the way. They arrived before the teleportation formation very soon. Heya was already waiting around it with Qing Yishuan. Kaya naturally recognized Qing Yishuan with a single glance, and she was slightly surprised. She glanced at Jianchen with much shock. Clearly, she too had never thought that she could encounter an acquaintance from the Tianyun continent on planet Tianming. However, Kaya and Qing Yishuan were not on any particular terms on the Tianyun continent, so they did not greet each other when they saw one another. Master. Heya brought Qing Yishuan to Jianchen before standing behind him conscientiously. Where are we going next? Qing Yishuan looked at Su Ran, Jianchen and Kaya. She bit her lip gently as she said softly. She could see the sternness of the three of them with a single glance. In her eyes, Jianchen was still that young Master Chongyang that had a significant background. Clearly, something bad had happened for the young master to show such an expression. Qing Yishuan became rather uneasy as a result. Jianchen and Kaya had already disguised themselves when they set foot on planet Tianming, so even until now, Qing Yishuan still had not discovered their real identities. Let's leave first. The two of you, enter the Divine Hall, said Jianchen. He took out a Divine Hall casually, and let Heya and Qing Yishuan in before entering the teleportation formation with Kaya and Su Ran. With a flash, they vanished. After they vanished from the teleportation formation, the guards who watched the place immediately began to whisper to each other. It's forbidden for people to take others in spatial treasures when they use the teleportation formation. That's the rule of the Thousand-Leaf Empire. Captain, why didn't we stop them? Shoo. Be quiet. Their background is just far too great, so great that our Thousand-Leaf Empire cannot afford to provoke them. I received firm orders from the higher-ups earlier that we can't provoke them. I think one of them is some young Master Chongyang. Young Master Chongyang? Who's that? Why have I never heard of him? The captain said grimly. I don't know who young Master Chongyang is either. Anyway, these were orders from the higher-ups. We just need to carry them out. We don't need to know the reason. The Feng Empire was one of the few eternal empires on planet Tianming. They possessed chaotic primes and were far more powerful than the Thousand-Leaf Empire. On the entire Dark Sky planet, there were only 4 eternal empires like the Feng Empire. The Feng Empire ranked second among the 4 of them. On the square within a bustling city of the Feng Empire, the teleportation formations would flicker with white light from time to time, where cultivators would come and go basically at all times. At this moment, the light on one of the teleportation formations vanished, and Jianchen, Kaya, and Su Ran appeared there. There are 6 known teleportation formations that can cross planes on planet Tianming. 4 of them are in the 4 eternal empires, while the other 2 are under the planet lord's estate's control. The teleportation formation of the Feng Empire is located in its imperial capital. Su Ran said to Jianchen and Kaya in the teleportation formation before taking Jianchen and Kaya and hurrying off to the imperial city. A black-robed, burly middle-aged man sat boldly on a throne in a majestic hall within the planet lord's estate, distant from the Feng Empire. He gave off a terrifyingly powerful presence, where it seemed like his burly body contained devastating energy. It seemed like he stood above the heavens, powerful enough to control all lives. He was the lord of planet Tianming, the existence who stood supreme there. He reigned over the entire place. Just when Jianchen, Kaya, and Su Ran reached the Feng Empire, the planet lord's eyes suddenly narrowed. He frowned slightly as he seemed displeased. He murmured, "The Azure Peng King wants me to seal up the entire planet? Does the Azure Peng King think he stands supreme in the saints' world? To ask for something so overboard from me? Sealing up the planet is not something small. But the Azure Peng King is infamous for his pettiness. He'll take offense over tiny things and remember it for the rest of his life. Whatever, I'll just do it for him this time. Seal up the entire planet immediately." Get the 4 empires to close their teleportation formations to other planes. The Planet Lord immediately passed down orders. Although he was reluctant, he dared not offend the Azure Peng King over such a puny matter. The Planet Lord's orders reached the 4 eternal empires in the shortest amount of time possible. The 4 empires dared not disobey or tarry with carrying out the orders, so they did it as quickly as possible. Immediately, the defensive formation of planet Tianyun was activated. No one could leave the planet and fly into space anymore while the teleportation formations in the 4 empires were shut down at basically the same time. Oh no! Planet Tianyun has been sealed up. Su Ran's face suddenly changed, and she stared at the sky gravely. Jianchen's face also changed suddenly from that. He called out, "Go to the teleportation formation." The 3 of them immediately rushed over to where the planar teleportation formations were. However, when they arrived there, their faces became very ugly. The only planar teleportation formation in the Feng Empire had already been shut down. Only the teleportation formations for locations on planet Tianyun still functioned. Jianchen's heart sank. He had realized that the sudden closure of the teleportation formations and the sealing of the planet had to do with him being exposed. We're in trouble now. Once the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Peng King learn that you're on planet Tianyun, it'll be impossible for us to shake off the 2 of them, even if I charge through the seal with you and flee into outer space, even if I was at my peak condition. Moreover, the Azure Peng King's speed is basically unrivaled. There is barely anyone in the Saints' world that can match up to him. And it's the same with chasing down people. No one will be able to escape from him. Su Ran became grimmer than she had ever been. Just when Su Ran finished talking, a terrifying presence radiated from the sky above in a mighty manner, enveloping the entire planet. Before the suffocating presence, all of the space where the planet occupied twisted drastically. Even the sky seemed like it was about to collapse. An extremely huge shadow had appeared near planet Tianyun silently. Even compared to the planet itself, it was not much smaller. This was the Azure Peng King in his original form. His colossal, planet-sized body was simply breathtaking. Chapter 2201. Dire Straits. The Azure Peng King had arrived in person. His colossal figure arrived in space, deeply shocking everyone on planet Tianyun. At that moment, countless people stared at the sky. From the planet, they looked at the huge Azure Peng that blotted out the sky. They were all stunned. At the same time, all the primordial realm experts in the Feng Empire were alarmed. All of them stopped what they were doing and emerged from seclusion, hovering in the air as they stared at the sky sternly. In various places across planet Tianyun, a few ancient existences who had once caused quite the ruckus awakened from their slumber. They roused from seclusion and also hovered in the sky, staring at the Azure Peng King sternly. Publicly renowned as the most powerful expert on planet Tianyun, the Planet Lord slowly made his way out from his hall. He stood outside as he stared at the Azure Peng King, who had come from outer space. He frowned, and then he murmured, "The Azure Peng King sent me a message just earlier to get me to seal up planet Tianyun. Only a few seconds have passed, and he has already arrived here. His speed truly is terrifying. But what I don't understand is what could make the Azure Peng King care so much, going as far as traveling such a great distance to come to this planet personally. Perhaps Jianchen, who he and the solitary sword ancestor are searching for, is on my dark sky planet?" As he thought that, the Planet Lord had already taken a step. He crossed through space and appeared outside the protective formations like he had teleported. He hovered before the Azure Peng King from a distance. The Azure Peng King did not shrink himself, so when the Planet Lord stood before his planet-sized body, the Planet Lord really did seem as insignificant as an ant. "Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance, may I ask what has angered you so much? There are many prodigies from various places on my dark sky planet. They're all innocent, and they can't endure your pressure," the Planet Lord said to the Azure Peng King with clasped hands. He smiled warmly, clearly showing some respect towards the Azure Peng King. The Azure Peng King had used his presence to envelop the planet right from the start. No matter what his reason for doing that was, it was basically provoking the entire planet. As the master of planet Tianyun, the Planet Lord had to stand forward. However, due to how powerful the Azure Peng King was, he dared not truly offend him. Jianchen, who this king is searching for, is on the planet. Open the formation immediately, said the Azure Peng King. His voice was cold and filled with killing intent. He spoke like it was an order, leaving no room for others to talk back. As he said that, his colossal body rapidly shrunk as he turned back into a middle-aged man in azure robes. His face was sickly pale. The Azure Peng King is clearly injured, and his wounds aren't light. It looks like it's true that he was injured by the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. The Planet Lord was secretly surprised when he saw the haggardness on the Azure Peng King's face. However, he showed none of it on his face. Immediately, he opened the formations around the planet and sighed emotionally. I never thought that the famous Jianchen would be on my tiny planet. However, Jianchen is no ordinary person either. It's said that he has close ties with the God Clan, where the little war god of the God Clan treats him like a brother. He said that he would protect Jianchen, forcing many peak organizations who resent Jianchen to give up on their hunt for him. After all, the God Clan was once the greatest clan in the Saints' world. Even though they've declined now, their heritage runs so deep that they still cannot be underestimated. Moreover, there's a young man from the Heavenly Palace of Bishing called Ming Dong. I heard that his relationship with Jianchen is anything but ordinary as well. Rumors about Ming Dong are everywhere in the Saints' world now. It's said that he's either the 8th Majesty's disciple, or the 1st Majesty's disciple. Jianchen's status really is extraordinary. The Planet Lord also loathed the Azure Peng King's condescending attitude, so he mentioned Ming Dong as well as the 8th and 1st Majesties of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing to secretly scoff at him. He had even mentioned the God Clan. His intentions were naturally to point out how the Azure Peng King treated himself with so much importance that he would not even respect the God Clan. The Azure Peng King glanced at the Planet Lord coldly, before directly flying towards the planet. What you said then was extremely likely to anger the Azure Peng King. Are you unafraid that the Azure Peng King will resent you because of this? 6 figures appeared silently behind the Planet Lord after the Azure Peng King had left. They varied in age, and they all seemed like ordinary people. However, their eyes were so profound that they seemed to hold a universe within them. The Azure Peng King was ordering me. He directly passed an order to me. He's far too haughty. I'm also a Grand Prime, just like him. He has his pride, but that doesn't mean I don't have mine. I can yield to him a little, but I will never bow down to him. The Planet Lord's face had also sunk. You're right. The Azure Peng King has indeed been too haughty. He hasn't taken our planet seriously at all. If it were the solitary sword ancestor, I'd naturally have nothing to say, but the Azure Peng King is unable to make me act like that willingly. An old man said emotionlessly. It's the infamous Azure Peng King. We're in deep trouble now. Su Ran became extremely stern in the Feng Empire. Beside her, Jianchen's face became extremely sunken as well. The light in his eyes flickered as he tried to think of a way to deal with the Azure Peng King. Kaya's expression also became rather uneasy. She clung onto Jianchen's arm tightly as she felt anxious. Before the Azure Peng King, all of your disguises are useless. After all, the difference between your cultivation levels is just too great. Also, the senses of a Grand Prime soul can easily envelop the entire planet. Su Ran said to Jianchen secretly as she was worried for the two of them. Jianchen's heart sank even more from that. The senses of the Azure Peng King's soul could envelop the entire planet. That meant that anything that happened on the planet, even just grass waving in the wind, would not be able to escape the Azure Peng King's senses. He was truly unable to hide on planet Tianming. Senior Su Kaya, enter my divine hall. Jianchen made up his mind on the spot. He dared not expose the Anata Tower at a place like this, so he could only take out an inconspicuous divine hall. At the same time, he clenched his last cosmic movement talisman. Currently, this was the only method of escape he could think of. However, before Jianchen could let Su Ran and Kaya into the divine hall, terrifying senses of the soul swept over, engulfing the entire planet. The planet seemed to stop as it was enveloped. Everything seemed to fall silent while origin energy seemed to freeze in that instance. All the cultivators below the primordial realm felt like their bodies had become restrained by a mysterious power that completely immobilized them. This was the senses of a grand prime soul. It could easily interfere with the operations of the world and control the lives of everyone. Oh no, Jianchen realized the horrible situation. Under the senses of the soul, a bone-chilling sensation rose up from the bottom of his heart. He felt like he had been thrown into a cavern of ice. Humph. Jianchen, this king would like to see where you escape off to. No one can save you today. At the same time, an icy voice rang out loudly. The Azure Peng king had appeared silently in the air above the Feng Empire. He stared at Jianchen coldly. No matter how Jianchen hid, he was unable to disguise himself before the Azure Peng king. He was recognized in a single glance. Chapter 2202. A Grand Prime's Pursuit. Jianchen immediately felt that an extremely powerful presence had locked onto him. The space around him seemed to seize up at that moment, cascading down on him. Not only did his body feel as heavy as a mountain, where he struggled to even lift his leg, but he even felt like a boulder crushed down on his chest, preventing him from breathing. Grand Primes are actually so terrifying. Jianchen was extremely shocked. The presence from the Azure Peng king made his heart shiver. If it were not for the fact that his chaotic body had reached the 13th layer, increasing his strength by several times over, he probably would not be able to even raise a finger before the Azure Peng king's pressure. He felt a presence of death with great clarity from the Azure Peng king. He knew that even after breaking through to the 13th layer, he was still as insignificant as an ant before the Azure Peng king. I never thought Jianchen would really be on planet Tianming. The planet lord hovered in outer space and stared at Jianchen in surprise. Jianchen is done for unless the experts of the God clan step forward. Jianchen still has a talisman in his hand. It looks like he wants to flee, but unfortunately, it's impossible for him to do that before the Azure Peng king with his current strength, because he won't even have the opportunity to activate the talisman. The little war god of the God clan has said that nothing can happen to Jianchen. I wonder if the Azure Peng king would really kill Jianchen or not. Hehe, I do hope for Jianchen to die to the hands of the Azure Peng king, so that I can see the God clan's response. If the God clan can teach the Azure Peng king a lesson, it'll be quite the delight. The people of various ages around the planet lord all stared at Jianchen in interest as they discussed. Azure Peng king, you actually want to personally harass a junior with your status. If this makes it out, it'll probably damage your name, Su Ran said with an ugly expression. She was unable to protect Jianchen either now that the Azure Peng king had come in person. The only thing she could do was warn the Azure Peng king about his status. Unfortunately, the Azure Peng king's temper was not logical. Such a concept did not exist in his head at all. Su Ran's words did not make the Azure Peng king's determination to kill Jianchen waver at all. Mo Chung was the disciple that this king placed the greatest hopes on. Since his death is related to you, you're also one of the people responsible. Even if the people of the God clan come to plead for mercy, they can't protect you, the Azure Peng king growled. Killing intent soared from his body as he directly extended a finger towards Jianchen's forehead. His gesture was only a very casual attack, but the world seemed to pale while the ground rumbled before it. It was as if his gesture had replaced the heavens, becoming a will that completely surpassed the heavens, enough to control everything. Even the thought of resisting became impossible. Moreover, the terrifying attack from the gesture not only enveloped Jianchen, but Kaya was not spared either. She also became a target for the Azure Peng king's attack. Clearly, the Azure Peng king did not even plan on letting Kaya go. Jianchen's eyes narrowed as he experienced a sense of danger greater than anything before. Chills ran down his spine. The Azure Peng king was just too terrifying and too powerful. Before him, Jianchen did not even have the chance to activate the Cosmic Movement Talisman. At that critical moment, a damaged tower covered in sword slashes suddenly appeared. Like a shield, it stood before Jianchen. Boom. The Azure Peng king's attack struck the damaged tower with unimaginably terrifying force. It erupted with an ear-splitting boom, as devastating energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings in the form of a storm. Space directly shattered, becoming covered with web-like cracks. The imperial capital of the Feng Empire was as fragile as paper before the energy. Countless structures collapsed in waves, while the protective formation only lasted for a few seconds before shattering loudly. Instantly, the majestic and prosperous imperial capital of the Feng Empire was reduced to a shape that bore no resemblance to its prior state. It had basically completely fallen into ruins. The cultivators who moved about in the city either became injured or dead. Countless people had their lives cut short. Only a few people with impressive strength managed to survive. The damaged tower had been knocked away quickly by the Azure Peng King's strike. Although Jianchen managed to block the Azure Peng King's attack completely by hiding behind it, his organs were thrown into turmoil when the tower collided into him. Many of his bones broke while his blood surged, forcing him to spit out a mouthful of blood uncontrollably in the end. Jianchen was already standing before Kaya, so she was fine. The appearance of the damaged tower made the Azure Peng King's eyes narrow suddenly. His unwavering heart began to pound uncontrollably at that moment as undisguised delight filled his eyes. The Anata Tower. It's actually the Anata Tower. The Azure Peng King recognized the tower with a single glance. His cold eyes now burned with desire. He temporarily forgot about Jianchen and flashed forwards right towards the Anata Tower. That tower seems to be, at the same time, the Planet Lord's originally sunken face from the Azure Peng King destroying the imperial capital suddenly became stunned. His eyes shone brightly as he became fixated on the damaged tower. The eyes of the peak experts who basically stood on the same level as the Planet Lord also lit up. All of their eyes lit up in that instance as they stared at the tower without blinking at all. It's the Anata Tower. It can't be wrong. It's definitely the Anata Tower. The Anata Tower is the Anata Grand Exalt's famed treasure. It's a renowned god artifact of the saint's world. There are even rumors that the Anata Tower has actually appeared with Jianchen. This is completely unbelievable. Whether it was the Planet Lord or the peak experts beside him, flames of desire sprang up in their eyes in the instance they recognized the Anata Tower. They were all interested. Then they looked at one another, and after gritting their teeth, they all charged towards the Anata Tower. They understood that once they took part, they would be offending the Azure Peng King, and it was likely that the Azure Peng King would hunt them down relentlessly. However, the Anata Tower was just worth far too much. It was enough for them to even go as far as becoming enemies with the Azure Peng King. Once they obtained the Anata Tower, they could offer it up to the heavenly palace of Bishing, and it would be a service of great merit. The merit would be so great that they might even be able to ask the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing to personally kill the Azure Peng King. And there would still be more to spare. They could use the remaining merit to exchange for benefits that satisfied them from the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. The Planet Lord and the others were nowhere near as fast as the Azure Peng King, but they were also Grand Primes after all. The distance between them and Jianchen was basically non-existent. With a single step, they all appeared around the Anata Tower. You're looking to die. The Azure Peng King's killing intent soared when he saw how they wanted to take something from him. At a time like this, he could no longer care about Jianchen. Bellowing out coldly, he directly attacked the Planet Lord and so on. In his eyes, Jianchen was an insignificant existence. Even if there were 100 or 1,000 Jianchens, it was still nowhere enough to tempt him more than the Anata Tower. As a result, his main objective became obtaining the Anata Tower now. It was also at this moment that Jianchen finally had enough time to activate the Cosmic Movement Talisman. He had no time to wait for Kaya to enter the Anata Tower. When every second mattered, he directly wrapped his right hand around Kaya's thin waist tightly and grabbed the Anata Tower after it had shrunk. Surrounded by the power from the talisman, he vanished. Do you think that you can escape from this, king? The Azure Peng King sneered when he saw Jianchen flee. He extended a hand, and a droplet of blood immediately flew over from afar, floating in his hand. The droplet of blood was Jianchen's chaotic blood. You will pay for your foolish actions today. The Azure Peng King glanced at the Planet Lord, and so on coldly before looking at the droplet of blood in his hand. He smiled happily for some reason. As long as I have your blood, I can find you with ease even if you flee to the ends of the world. With that, the Azure Peng King immediately shot off into the distance. He unleashed his extreme speed, disappearing into the cosmos. Su Ran floated above the ruins of the Feng Empire in a rather horrible shape. She thought. The Anata Tower has been exposed. They're in trouble now. And the Azure Peng King has a droplet of Jianchen's blood. He just needs to use a secret technique with Jianchen's blood as a medium, and he would be able to find Jianchen's location with absolute ease. It'll be very difficult for Jianchen to escape. Even if he hides in the Anata Tower, there'll be traces of him. It looks like I can only pay a visit to the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng. Even though I really don't like that place, perhaps this is the only way to save Jianchen from the Azure Peng King. Chapter 2203. Fleeing into a crack after making up her mind, Su Ran set off immediately. The Feng Empire had already been reduced to ruins, and even the imperial capital had not been spared. Naturally, the teleportation formation there had been destroyed. She hurried off to a second Eternal Empire to use their planar teleportation formation, so that she could reach the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng sooner. Now we've done it. We've made a huge mistake. Now not only will we be hunted down by the Azure Peng King relentlessly, but even our clans will be dragged into it. The peak experts of planet Tianming and the planet Lord gathered together with extremely ugly expressions. They had truly gone for wool and come back shorn. Not only did they fail to obtain the Anata Tower, but they had even offended the Azure Peng King as well. Since Jianchen has fled with the Anata Tower, trying to hunt him down will be completely useless. Even if we ignore the fact that we can't find Jianchen as easily as the Azure Peng King, it's impossible for us to match up to the Azure Peng King in terms of speed. Let's think about how to deal with the Azure Peng King's revenge instead. The Azure Peng King is someone who will always seek revenge even for the smallest of things. He will never just let what happened today go. Immediately send people to the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng. Although we can't hand the Anata Tower to them personally, if we're the first people to inform them about the Anata Tower, it'll be a matter of great merit as well. In a region of space extremely distant from planet Tianming, the calm space there suddenly rippled like water. In the next moment, it suddenly warped violently, and two figures suddenly appeared out of nowhere as if they had teleported. The two of them were Jianchen and Kaya, who had fled here through the cosmic movement talisman. Spurt. As soon as they appeared, Jianchen could not help but spray out blood from his mouth again. His face became rather pale. Jianchen, are you fine? Are your wounds heavy? Kaya asked in concern. Immediately, she wanted to support Jianchen. However, as soon as she moved, she discovered that Jianchen's arm was wrapped around her waist tightly. It was powerful, preventing her from moving. Sensing the power and warmth from Jianchen's arm, Kaya struggled to remain calm. Her heart pounded in a rather uncontrollable manner as the depths of her heart wavered. Sensing Kaya's movement, Jianchen immediately released his hand around her. Under such a tight situation before, it was impossible for Kaya to enter the Anata Tower in time. As a result, he could only grab her tightly and flee through the cosmic movement talisman. He had no other intentions apart from that. The light in Kaya's eyes rippled as she looked at Jianchen with some mixed feelings. She said in a voice filled with concern, "Here's a god-tier heavenly resource for recovery. Eat it quickly and stabilize your wounds." As she said that, Kaya took out a heavenly resource she had obtained from her share in the Neptunian Divine Palace, and passed it to Jianchen. At the same time, Kaya opened her hand, and an invisible suction immediately appeared. She gathered all of Jianchen's chaotic blood in the surroundings, condensing the blood into a thumb-sized droplet in her hand in the end. "I know you exhaust a tremendous amount of cultivation resources for each breakthrough. Your blood contains a portion of your energy, so every droplet you lose will mean that you lose a portion of your energy. You can't waste this blood." As she said that, Kaya slowly raised her hand and made the droplet of blood approach Jianchen's mouth. Jianchen looked at the droplet of blood and nodded slightly. Sucking gently, he swallowed all of the blood and said, "My injuries are no big deal. I'll be able to make a complete recovery before long." As he said that, he paused and looked at the space behind him. His face became extremely stern as he said gravely, "I once heard that the Azure Peng King is unmatched in terms of speed. Although we've managed to escape with the cosmic movement talisman, I have a strong feeling that we're not safe right now. The Azure Peng King should catch up very soon." Kaya also dismissed her thoughts when she heard that. She became stern and growled, "With our speed, It's impossible to escape from the Azure Peng King if we hurry through outer space. The Azure Peng King should have many methods to find us, so it looks like we can only enter a spatial crack to avoid being hunted down. You're right. It is chaotic within a spatial crack, where even the laws of the world are affected. Even if the Azure Peng King is a Grand Prime, he'll be impacted to a certain degree in a spatial crack. Moreover, we have the Anata Tower with us, so we don't have to worry about the spatial storms at all. We can just charge through them fearlessly. To us right now, it really might be a place where we can shake off Grand Primes. Jian Chen's eyes lit up, and he immediately took out the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. He said to Kaya, "Let's not tarry and enter right now. However, I won't be able to rip through space alone. Kaya, I need your assistance. We need to unleash our full strengths and rip through the space here." "All right." Kaya nodded in agreement before standing beside Jian Chen and striking out with her full strength. The laws of creation, destruction, and fire were all used. The 3 different types of laws were combined perfectly by her, forming a glyph that she sent towards the space before her. At the same time, Jian Chen's sword shone with dazzling starlight. Huge, illusionary stars were conjured one after another. With a force no weaker than the primordial realm, he struck the space before him. Jian Chen and Kaya had unleashed their most powerful attacks at the same time, causing the space before them to tremble. A meter-long crack suddenly appeared. "Enter the tower," Jian Chen called out. With a flash, the 2 of them entered the Anata Tower. He controlled the tower to shrink to the size of a fist before passing through the crack. The crack closed up by itself soon after the Anata Tower had entered it. It returned to normal, causing the region of space to recover its previous peace. However, this peace did not last for too long before being shattered once again. A dazzling azure light flickered in the depths of space, heading straight towards where Jian Chen had vanished. The azure light was just too fast. It was unbelievably fast. The moment before, it was still in the depths of space, but in the next moment it had arrived at Jian Chen's previous location, crossing the insurmountable distance as if it had teleported. The azure figure happened to be the Azure Peng King, who was in hot pursuit. Jian Chen's traces have actually vanished here? The Azure Peng King hovered in the sea of stars alone as he stared at the chaotic blood in his hand for a while. The tremendous senses of his soul immediately flooded out, enveloping an entire galaxy. But very soon he frowned. He discovered nothing with the senses of his soul. He failed to find Jian Chen's traces at all. He had even used a secret technique with the droplet of chaotic blood after arriving here, but he failed to find any trace of Jian Chen either. It was as if Jian Chen had vanished from the universe. You're dreaming if you want to escape right before me." The Azure Peng King snorted coldly. His eyes were extremely icy. Then he closed his eyes and fused his soul with the world, using his Grand Prime level comprehension of laws to peer into the past and the future. "So you've hidden in a spatial crack. Aren't you far too naive to think that you can escape from me like that? I have to get the Anata Tower before the solitary sword ancestor arrives." The Azure Peng King opened his eyes very soon and sneered. He split open space easily, and with a flash he disappeared into the spatial crack. Chapter 2204. Temporal Vortex. Violent streams of energy and spatial storms filled the spatial crack, along with terrifying temporal vortices. There was danger as far as the eye could see. Even the slightest carelessness could result in damnation. Even primordial realm experts had to be careful and cautious here. Otherwise, even primordial realm experts would die here. There was a fist-sized damaged tower covered in slashes within this danger-ridden spatial crack. It turned into a faint streak of golden light as it charged through the various powerful streams of energy and space-distorting storms recklessly. It advanced in an unstoppable manner. It was as if the spatial crack that was enough to cause many primordial realm experts to pale and tread lightly posed no threat to the tiny tower at all. The tiny tower would only avoid the temporal vortices that could twist time. Naturally, it was the Anata Tower. Jian Chen and Kaya currently sat in the Anata Tower with their eyes closed. Jian Chen's entire mind had fused with the Anata Tower completely as he used all his efforts to control the Anata Tower's flight through the spatial crack. He knew that the Azure Peng King would catch up very soon, so he dared not be careless. Even when they had successfully entered the spatial crack, which gave them a special advantage as the laws were chaotic and incomplete, weakening the Azure Peng King's abilities drastically, he still could not stop worrying. As a result, he did not even try to heal. He spent all his efforts on piloting the Anata Tower. Kaya sat beside Jianchen with her eyes closed. She also sensed the situation outside the Anata Tower, through her own method. The Anata Tower was an impressive god artifact. Its interior had become its own, independent miniature world. Logically speaking, no one should be able to sense the situation outside from within the tower apart from Jianchen, who had refined a fraction of the tower. Yet, Kaya was an exception. Although she had not refined the Anata Tower like Jianchen, or even gained any control over it before, she could clearly sense everything outside despite being in the tower. Strange. Why do I feel like I can control the tower like Jianchen? This really is a strange feeling. Kaya felt extremely puzzled. She completely had no idea why she would feel that. At that moment, she even felt an urge to try to control the Anata Tower. However, when she saw how Jianchen was piloting the Anata Tower, she could only suppress this urge. I seem to have a connection with the tower that even I can't explain. This feeling didn't exist in the beginning. As my strength rapidly increased, this feeling slowly appeared, and it's becoming stronger and stronger. Kaya furrowed her brows, but no matter how she racked her brain, she still had no idea in the end. At this moment, Kaya's heart suddenly tightened. In that instance, she felt like her soul had strengthened, where her connection with the Anata Tower grew stronger. A sliver of her consciousness seemed to drift out of the Anata Tower, allowing her to see an azure streak of light pursue them with unbelievable speed. Currently, it was still extremely far behind them. It's the Azure Peng King. He's actually this fast. Kaya's heart tightened. She opened her eyes and looked at Jianchen, and knew that he had not discovered the Azure Peng King. However, the Azure Peng King was just too fast. He had turned into an Azure Peng that was only 2 meters in size. With a flap of his wings, he could cross a tremendous distance. Space seemed to fold up before him. When Kaya discovered him, he was still hundreds of million kilometers away from the Anata Tower, but in just a few seconds, he appeared a few million kilometers away, and he was rapidly growing closer. Oh no, the Azure Peng King is coming. Kaya immediately warned Jianchen. Jianchen opened his eyes when he heard that. He glanced at her suspiciously. He was aware of the outside world at all times. It was impossible for anything that happened within a range of several 100,000 kilometers to escape his senses. Yet he had failed to discover the Azure Peng King. Even though he was very confused about how Kaya was able to determine that the Azure Peng King was coming, he trusted her completely, so without any hesitation he changed the direction of the Anata Tower, and headed towards an even more dangerous region. Just as the Anata Tower had turned, a huge hand completely condensed from energy suddenly appeared. With terrifying might, it grabbed at the space where the Anata Tower was prior. Due to being so close, Jianchen saw the hand that had suddenly appeared with great clarity as well. This made his face change. If he had not changed the direction of the Anata Tower in time, the tower really would have ended up in the grasp of the energy hand. Jianchen understood that although the Azure Peng King was unable to destroy the Anata Tower, he was a Grand Prime who stood at the apex after all. As a result, his abilities were so exceptional that they would be facing a horrible situation if the tower ended up in his hands. Afterwards, Jianchen advanced by zigzagging. He went where danger was present, emboldened by the toughness of the Anata Tower. There has never been someone who has escaped from me once they've caught my eye. Even if you choose a special place like this and restrict my abilities to a certain extent, you still can't escape from me. The Azure Peng King sneered in the form of a small bird behind them. Even though spatial cracks were enough to threaten primordial realm experts, he was an existence who stood at the apex of the Saints' world. He had great capabilities and was extremely powerful. There was nothing in spatial cracks that could pose a threat to him. It would only obstruct him slightly at most. The Azure Peng King flapped his wings, and immediately they glowed with azure light, which turned into a violent gust of wind. The gale possessed unimaginable power. All the chaotic streams of energy and spatial storms that blocked the Azure Peng King's way collapsed from the gale, like a pile of leaves. Space shook violently. The residual power of the gale caught up with the Anata Tower, causing it to tremble and totter. It was tossed around constantly in space. Jianshan struggled to control it. The Anata Tower immediately slowed down. The Azure Peng King, on the other hand, used this opportunity to close the distance. From over 1,000,000 kilometers away, he arrived around 1,000 kilometers away from the tower. In the Anata Tower, Jianshan's face sank. Then he shifted his target towards a nearby temporal vortex and immediately made up his mind. Charging over with the Anata Tower. Jianshan had always feared the temporal vortices within spatial cracks. Even with the Anata Tower, he dared not tread in them. This was because he had already witnessed the power of temporal vortices in the past. He deeply understood that the flow of time within them was extremely unstable. He was afraid that several tens of thousand years would pass in an instant if he fell into one, where the outside world had already changed when he emerged again. Or perhaps time would run backwards and change him into a newly born infant. The very basis of life, or even to nothingness. But now he was out of choices with the Azure Peng King's close pursuit. Swish. The Anata Tower directly entered the temporal vortex as a faint golden streak of light. Chapter 2205. The Heavenless demon Exalt. When the Azure Peng King saw how Jianshan actually charged into a temporal vortex without any consideration for his personal safety, he scoffed. Temporal vortices could indeed pose life-threatening danger to other primordial realm experts, but with his current level of cultivation, he had stopped fearing them since a long time ago. The Azure Peng King tailed them closely, and also charged into the temporal vortex. But very soon, the Azure Peng King was stunned. He discovered that the Anata Tower he had locked onto had suddenly vanished from his vision, as soon as he entered the temporal vortex. God damn it! The Azure Peng King could not help but swear to himself. He knew better than anyone else that he had been affected by the temporal vortex. It seemed like he had entered the vortex at basically the same time as the Anata Tower, but the period of time he experienced in there was completely different from what the Anata Tower experienced. In that split second, he might have stayed in the temporal vortex for a very long time already, which was why the Anata Tower had suddenly vanished. The Azure Peng King flapped his wings violently and charged towards outside with extreme speed. At the same time, extremely great power of laws wrapped around him to fend off the incoming temporal changes. At this moment, if someone was standing outside of the temporal vortex, they would discover that the Azure Peng King seemed to be in slow motion, flapping his wings at an extremely gradual rate. He seemed no faster than a snail. Just when the Azure Peng King was about to charge out of the temporal vortex, the streams of energy nearby suddenly became extremely violent. The temporal vortices in the surroundings seemed to experience some sort of attraction, drawn over from all directions around the Azure Peng King. Several dozen of them formed a huge temporal storm. It was on a magnificent scale, trapping the Azure Peng King inside. It seemed like the temporal vortices had been purposefully gathered by a huge, mysterious hand to target the Azure Peng King. Regardless of the direction in which the Azure Peng King charged off in, he would run into a second, third, and fourth temporal vortex. Even though these temporal vortices posed no threat or harm to the Azure Peng King at all, it did keep him busy and temporarily trapped there. Although the Prosper Plane was one of the 49 planes of the Saints' world, it was so powerful that it completely exceeded the other planes. Out of the 49 planes and 81 planets, it was one of the few peak planes. This was because the Heavenly Palace of Bishing was located on the Prosper Plane. Not only was the Heavenly Palace of Bishing the name of an organization, but it was also one of the Anata Grand Prime's 3 great treasures. The Anata Grand Prime was also one of the 7 grand exalts of the current Saints' world, where his cultivation had reached the peak of Grand Prime, becoming an existence akin to the laws themselves. He would always reside on the Prosper Plane to cultivate, subconsciously affecting the operation of the world, and impacting its order such that the laws of the world on the Prosper Plane were even thicker and clearer. Hence, people could comprehend them with great ease. It gave birth to wave after wave of experts. As time went on, the Prosper Plane became one of the few peak planes of the Saints' world. Organizations like Everlasting Empires and Peak Clans were nothing rare on the Prosper Plane. As for the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, It was the sacred land of all the cultivators on the Prosper Plain. They possessed a supreme status there. At this moment, a figure shrouded by a hazy glow was standing before a lake within the majestic heavenly palace of Bishing in the center of the Prosper Plain. The laws of the world condensed around him such that he seemed like he had truly become a part of the laws and the world, becoming the supreme overlord of the universe. Every single word and action represented the will of the world. The lake before the person did not show clear water. Instead, it showed a multicolored space of chaos that was filled with streams of energy and spatial storms. It showed what was happening in the spatial crack. The most attention-grabbing part of the spatial crack was how several dozen temporal vortices had gathered together, trapping an azure bird that had shrunken to the size of 2 meters. Master, I saw the important figures of planet Tianming come with their planet lord earlier. They stated that they wanted to see the First Majesty. The First Majesty, however, is currently under Master's orders to collect senior Ancient Path's soul fragments, so she isn't present. As a result, I could only report this to Master. An old voice rang out from outside. It was the artifact spirit of the heavenly palace of Bishing. The artifact spirit could control everything inside the heavenly palace of Bishing, where he could understand anything that was happening inside with a single thought. However, the entire region where the shrouded figure stood clearly was not something that the artifact spirit could sense. He did not know what was happening there either. After a slight pause, the artifact spirit continued politely. The news they bring is rather important. They seem to know the whereabouts of Master's treasure. Let them return, the hazy figure by the lake said. His voice was icy and emotionless, and it also seemed to possess all the sounds of the world, making it impossible to distinguish the figure's gender. Yes, Master. The artifact spirit backed away politely. My fourth way has already developed a basic form. Before long, it will truly take shape, the shrouded figure murmured gently. With a gentle wave of his hand, the world reflected by the lake changed. The scene of the spatial crack vanished, and countless worlds flashed by. Even the world where the Tianyun continent resided in flashed past. I've already searched through the entire Saints world in all these years. I've looked through millions of Lowers worlds as well, but I've failed to find your trace. Flame Reverend, just where are you hiding? As the only everlasting empire on the cloud plane, the Tian Empire did indeed possess terrifying, unshakable strength. They were especially frightening. Apart from the Heaven's Link Peak, no peak clan or organization on the cloud plane could make its status waver. At this moment, in the depths of the imperial palace of the Tian Empire, 3 ancient towers that reached into the clouds stood like silent pillars that held up the sky. The 3 ancient towers were where the pride of the Tian Empire resided, as well as where the reason why the Tian Empire could exist was. It represented their absolute power. But at this moment, black clouds abruptly rolled out from one of the ancient towers. Laws gathered as a terrifying presence suddenly swept out, engulfing the entire central region in a single instance before spreading towards the 4 other regions. It caused the entire sky to pulse with instability. The Heavenless demon Exalt has actually broken through. At the same time, 2 old men silently appeared on top of the 2 other towers. They stared at the tower shrouded in demonic aura in delight. Fantastic! The Heavenless demon Exalt has broken through successfully, and has reached the 4th heavenly layer. He has formally made it to Mid-Grand Prime. He has become the only Mid-Grand Prime on the cloud plane. I'd like to see how the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak plans on stopping our Tian clan from conquering the entire cloud plane now. The other old man was also overjoyed as he said in high spirits. Chapter 2206. Movements in the Dark. One of the 2 old men was an ancestral emperor, who had abdicated many years ago, while the other was the first imperial protector since the Tian Empire's founding. The 2 of them were the most ancient existences of the Tian Empire. They had reached Grand Prime many years ago, and were peak experts who stood at the apex of the plane. At this moment, the demonic aura around the tower where the Heavenless demon Exalt resided receded, revealing a black figure in the demonic clouds. He was a black-robed middle-aged man with a rather cold and malevolent expression. He hovered in the air like a sovereign of the world as a supreme presence radiated from him. The presence was so powerful that the world seemed to pale and space seemed to distort. It seemed like he had already become the ruler of the world, where his eyes possessed a sense of coldness that looked down on all lives. This person was the Heavenless demon Exalt, as well as the second imperial protector since the founding of the Tian Empire. Right when the Heavenless demon Exalt broke through, a ruddy, sagely old man sat on the ground on the peak of a mountain clad in formations with origin energy, so abundant that it almost condensed into liquid. He focused on explaining the laws of the world and the mysteries of the cosmos to an old man in blood-red robes. Every single word and action from him seemed to represent the truths of the world, enough to resonate with the laws. The laws seemed to be rumbling and revolving around him. Suddenly, a bright light flashed through the old man's eyes. In that instance, his gaze became as profound as the universe. He stared into the distance as he abruptly became stern. Something terrible has happened. I never thought the Heavenless demon Exalt of the Tian Empire would actually break through. The cloud plane will no longer be at peace. The ruddy, sagely old man stood up and said sternly while he gazed into the distance. Peak Lord, what has happened? The red-robed old man also stood up as he asked cautiously. Something major is about to happen on the cloud plane. Peak organizations might vanish from history. However, this has nothing to do with you. Houston, all you need to do is cultivate here in peace and wait for that person. The sagely old man referred to as the Peak Lord said. He was the lord of the Heavens Link Peak. He possessed extremely great status on the cloud plane. Houston became stern when he heard that. After a moment of silence he asked, "Will the Tianyun clan be dragged into whatever happens this time?" The Tianyun clan will be able to avoid it. After all, with their strength, they have no right to get involved. Unfortunately, the Tianyun clan is connected to the Shi clan of the northern region. The Peak Lord sighed gently. Peak Lord, I want to return to the Tianyun clan immediately. Houston immediately made up his mind. Once you leave, you'll be in great danger. Houston, before that person arrives, just cultivate here in peace. I won't let you take a single step away from this place. The Peak Lord said firmly. He left no room for discussion. At the same time, many peak existences hidden across the ancient lands of the cloud plane roused from seclusion. They all looked towards the Tian Empire in the central region. They were either grave or filled with eagerness and excitement. The Heavenless demon Exalt has actually broken through. The Tian clan is filled with wild ambition. They've never given up on conquering the entire cloud plane. Only the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak prevented them from acting recklessly. Now that the Heavenless demon Exalt has broken through, the Tian clan will truly possess the power to suppress the Peak Lord. No one can stop the advance of the Tian clan on the cloud plane anymore. Extremely powerful senses of the soul cross the regions in various places of the cloud plane and discuss with one another. At the same time, a majestic divine hall stood silently like a primordial beast in an unknown space extremely distant from the cloud plane. It gave off a terrifying presence that was enough to frighten the world. The divine hall seemed to suppress an entire region of the world. When it stood there, the independent, unknown space seemed to submit itself to the divine hall, kneeling below the divine hall's feet. At this moment, a rather stern voice suddenly rang out from a gloomy secret room at the top of the divine hall. Something big is about to happen on the cloud plane. Even I might get involved in this. It looks like I can't let her remain there any longer. After a period of silence, the voice suddenly yelled out, "Cheng Ming, come see me immediately." The voice was not loud, but it reached every inch of the divine hall. With that, a black-robed old man silently appeared outside the secret room. He bowed politely and said, "Greetings to Master. Go to the cloud plane immediately, and bring her to me from the southern region safely. This is an image of her and her presence. With your cultivation, you should be able to sense her immediately when you reach the cloud plane." As he said that, a stream of consciousness flowed out from the secret room and directly entered the old man's forehead. It formed a little girl. "If she's unwilling to leave with you, take out this lock of hair." With that, a tied-up lock of black hair appeared outside the secret room, floating before Cheng Ming. Cheng Ming's eyes suddenly narrowed when he saw the lock of hair. He could tell with a single glance that it belonged to his master. His master's presence clearly lingered on it. Qingming dared not tarry. He carefully accepted the lock of hair and stowed it away carefully before leaving immediately. Where is War Demon? Qingming arrived in an empty hall within the Divine Hall and called out, Grand Elder. A deep voice rang out in the empty hall. A terrifying pressure suddenly permeated the surroundings when the voice sounded. It seemed like it could collapse the sky as it filled the entire hall with a devastating force. Come with me to the cloud plane. I have an ill foreboding about this trip, so we have to be extra careful, Qingming said grimly. If the Grand Elder can sense an ill foreboding, it means that the trip to the cloud plane this time might not be peaceful. Hee, it has been quite some time since I last fought. I really do look forward to what I can encounter this time. I hope it doesn't disappoint me too much. Chapter 2207. The changes of the cloud plane in the depths of the imperial palace of the Shi Empire. 3 ancient stone towers stood silently within a forbidden ground. The 3 stone towers represented the absolute power of the Shi Empire. Apart from the current Shi Emperor, they were all the chaotic primes of the empire. They spent most of their time in seclusion within the stone tower, away from worldly affairs. The 3 of them would only be alarmed if extremely dire matters that could threaten the empire happened. But at this moment, the 3 chaotic primes who normally stayed in their own towers were gathered together. Even the dignified Shi Emperor sat below sternly in his dragon robes. The Heavenless demon Exalt of the Tian Empire has broken through. A storm of blood will be kicked up on the cloud plane soon, and those involved will be the peak organizations who stand at the apex of the plane. However, our Shi clan, as one of the 4 eternal empires of the cloud plane, control over 80% of the territory in the northern region, so we can't just stay out of this storm. We will definitely be dragged in. There are only 2 choices presented before us right now. The first choice is to yield to the Tian Empire and become one of their subsidiary, where we follow their orders from today onwards. The other choice is to join the resistance and oppose the Tian Empire's path to domination together. I wonder what the 3 of you think of this matter. The oldest ancestral emperor, Shi Lianxue, asked emotionlessly as he looked at the 3 other people. Shi Haoshuan, Shi Haoming, and the current Shi Emperor, Shi Ziyun, remained silent. Although there have been cases where an entire plane has been united under a single rule throughout history, it doesn't happen frequently. As a result, I don't think it'll be easy for the Tian clan to conquer the entire cloud plane this time. There will definitely be a resistance led by the Heaven's Link Peak. Even if the Heavenless demon Exalt has broken through and the Lord of the Heaven's Link Peak is no longer his opponent, that doesn't mean he can't put up a fight. After a moment of thought, the Shi Emperor's father, Shi Haoshuan, broke the silence first and analyzed carefully. You're right. After all, the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak held the title of the strongest on the cloud plane before the Heavenless demon Exalt had broken through. His battle prowess is exceptional, and rarely does he have an opponent at the same level. Even if he's no longer the Heavenless demon Exalt's opponent, he will still able to put up a fight, said Shi Haoming. He held great confidence in the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak. It doesn't matter whether the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak is the opponent of the Heavenless demon Exalt. If we yield to the Tian clan, we will definitely face obstruction from the God's Fallen clan. After all, the God's Fallen clan receives a large number of tributes from us every year. Once we yield to the Tian clan, it means they will lose our tributes permanently. As a result, they will never just stand by and let us yield to the Tian clan, the Shi Emperor said firmly. He continued, compared to yielding to the Tian clan and placing all our chips on them, I'd rather maintain our relationship with the God's Fallen clan. What if I recommend standing with the Tian clan? Shi Lianxue raised an eyebrow and looked at the 3 of them. Ancestral Emperor, we must consider this matter thoroughly. The Shi Emperor, Shi Haoming, and Shi Haoshuan all objected. They disagreed with yielding to the Tian clan. The ancestral emperor Shi Lianxue nodded. Since the 3 of you have doubts in the Tian clan's plan to unite, then, as soon as he reached there, a black demonic aura suddenly flashed through Su Lianxue's pupils. His face immediately turned cold, and with a thought, a powerful pulse of energy radiated out. Countless strands of energy appeared out of nowhere, wrapping around Shi Ziyun, Shi Haoshuan, and Shi Haoming. Not only was Shi Lianxue the ancestral emperor of the Shi Empire in the eyes of Shi Ziyun, Shi Haoshuan, and Shi Haoming, he was also the senior they admired the most. The three of them had never thought that Shi Lianxue, who was basically family, would suddenly attack them. As a result, they were caught off guard, and they became tightly bound by the threads of energy. Moreover, some of the threads entered their bodies, not only immobilizing them but also sealing up their cultivation and the senses of their souls. Ancestral Emperor Waiyu, Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming looked at Shi Lianxue, who they respected the most, in disbelief. At that moment, they only felt their hearts ache. The Shi Emperor's face sank instead. He glared at Shi Lianxue emotionlessly and said coldly, "Ancestral Emperor, what are you trying to do? I can't get you to join the Tian clan, so this is all I can do. Our Shi Empire will be standing on the Tian clan's side this time, and we will be assisting them with all we have to conquer the Cloud Plain," said Shi Lianxue. This did not just happen in the Shi Empire of the northern region. The Blood Sun Empire of the southern region, the Zihao Empire of the eastern region, and the Jinjian Empire of the western region all suffered similar incidents at different times. All the peak experts in the imperial family who disagreed with supporting the Tian clan had been trapped through various means by the people who held the greatest authority. In that short period of time, the four renowned eternal empires of the Cloud Plain had silently changed hands. The black-robed Heavenless demon Exalt gathered with the two other grand primes of the Tian Empire in a majestic hall within the imperial palace. They were all silent. The Heavenless demon Exalt sat in the air with his eyes closed while the other two grand primes both stared at him. At this moment, the eyes of the Heavenless demon Exalt snapped open. He said indifferently, "The four eternal empires of the Cloud Plain are under my control. We can start the plan." Fantastic! With the submission of the four empires, we have absolute control over the four regions. Next, we only need to focus on dealing with the peak clans. The other two grand primes of the Tian Empire beamed. A vicious light suddenly flashed through the Heavenless demon Exalt's eyes. He said coldly, "Before we deal with them, let's eliminate the foreigners first. Let's start with the Empyrean demon cult first." "What? You want to move against the Empyrean demon cult? Are you confident that you can deal with their great elder? Provoking the Empyrean demon cult at a time like this might not be a clever decision." The two other grand primes became fearful when the Empyrean demon cult was mentioned. "It's no problem. Although the great elder of the Empyrean demon cult once had a glorious battle record, his strongest opponent was only at the second heavenly layer, so I'm certain that he's at the third heavenly layer at most. There's no need for us to fear him. And the reason why we should start with the Empyrean demon cult is because their branch has soul beads and blood beads refined from many lives. It's exactly what I need to refine my treasure," said the Heavenless demon Exalt coldly. As he said that, he extended a hand. Immediately, several dozen cultivators below the primordial realm exploded to death across the cloud plain. The space rings on their fingers exploded as well as a small, black banner flew out. After absorbing the souls of those cultivators, the banner shot off with lightning speed. At the same time, streaks of black light shot over from afar and arrived before the Heavenless demon Exalt. They turned into small, black flags in the end. There were a total of 80 of them. The Heavenless demon Exalt suddenly frowned when he looked at the black banners. He growled, "Why is one of my 9 soul-gathering banners missing?" Chapter 2208. The Tianyun Clan Humph. "I'd like to see just who took my 9 soul-gathering banner." The Heavenless demon Exalt snorted coldly afterwards. With a thought, the tremendous senses of his soul surged out like a flood, enveloping the entire cloud plain. However, his face sank very soon. The senses of his soul had engulfed the entire cloud plain. Apart from the few peak clans that were protected by formations, he had scoured every inch of the land, including underground. Despite doing so, he still failed to find the missing banner. It looks like the missing banner has either been hidden by a peak clan or taken away from the cloud plain. However, the 81 banners are refined from my demonic blood, so every single one of them are linked to my mind. Let me see just which peak clan dares to take what's mine. Even if the banner has been taken away from the cloud plain by someone, I can still locate it with great precision. the Heavenless demon Exalt said coldly. Immediately, the demonic aura around him churned as he emitted a pulse of terrifying energy. He used a secret technique to find the location of the last banner. The other two Grand Primes of the Tian Empire sat before the Heavenless demon Exalt silently. Currently, the two of them had become stern as well. The Heavenless demon Exalt was crucial to whether they could conquer the cloud plane. They did not wish to see any accidents happen. A while later, the demonic aura around the Heavenless demon Exalt gradually calmed down. He opened his eyes, and they were filled with cruelty. His face had sunken. "Heavenless, have you found the final banner?" One of the Grand Primes asked rather nervously before the Heavenless demon Exalt. "I actually can't sense the final banner at all. However, even if a banner is missing, it won't be able to affect our grand plan of unifying the cloud plane." The divine kingdom of Peng that had once been nameless in the southern region was basically in existence that everyone knew about now. Not only had it morphed from a weak divine kingdom into an ancient empire with a primordial realm expert, but most importantly, the Tianyun clan existed within it. In terms of strength, the Tianyun clan was nothing on the southern region. Some people would not even take them seriously. However, there were no organizations on the vast southern region that dared to underestimate the Tianyun clan, much less offend them. That was because their greatest elder was the only daughter of the current emperor of the Shi Empire. The Shi Emperor was a renowned emperor among the four eternal empires. For the sake of avenging his daughter, he went as far as to kill most of the members of his imperial family. Even the prestigious Grand Imperial Protector of the Shi Empire was not spared. His viciousness and mercilessness had already engraved itself into the hearts of people, making countless people shiver. At the same time, his love for his daughter was something that many people admired. As a result, with such a forceful and vicious father, there was naturally no one who dared to offend Shiyu in both the northern and southern regions. The Tianyun clan she resided in gained glory as a result, enjoying a status that did not match up to their strength at all. The Tianyun clan remained in the same location in the Dong'an province of the divine kingdom of Peng. However, it had already changed dramatically compared to when Jianchen departed in the past. Not only did its territory grow by several times over, but it also possessed a more generous bearing. It was possible to see from afar that their fabulous buildings were laid down in an orderly manner. They seemed grand and magnificent, giving off an almost holy aura. A few figures strolled through the fragrant gardens of the Tianyun clan at this moment. "I never thought that so much would have happened after I left the Tianyun continent." The world of the Tianyun continent had almost been destroyed as well, but thankfully everyone toughed it out. A young man with a striking appearance sighed emotionally. He wore white robes and seemed like he was in his 20s. "The only pity is that after coming all the way from the Prosper Plain, all I got to see was you, the little tiger, and the two kids. The three seniors, Ruijin, Honglian, Heiyu, and that snake are not here." The young man shook his head in pity. His voice contained undisguised reminiscence and memories. Unsurprising, the young man was Ming Dong. You're the kid. You're the kid. You can't bully people just because you're taller. Let me tell you, I'm a little ancestor who has lived for over 1,000,000 years. Who knows how many years I slumbered for before you were born on the Tianyun continent. Even your ancestors aren't as old as me. A pure girl who only seemed to be 11 or 12 glared at Ming Dong with her hands on her hips as she fumed. Naturally, the girl was Xiaoling, Xiaojin, and Sacred Feather were with them as well. Xiaojin still wore his golden clothes, where he seemed like he was made out of gold. He had already grown up now. He seemed much more mature, no longer the little boy from Flame City. Sacred Feather seemed like a handsome young man now. He stood up straight as he strolled slowly with his hands on his back. He was serious and cold in everything he did. He gave off the bearing of an expert. Ming Dong only knew the three of them out of the entire Tianyun clan. Newbies Ruijin, Honglian, and Heiya had already gone out roaming several years ago. As for Xiongzhong, Cheng Jingyan, and so on who came from the world of Forsaken Saints, Ming Dong did not know any of them. "Oh, is this little sister really that old?" He, I really couldn't tell." A beautiful woman in snow-white clothes looked at the unaging Xiaoling from beside Ming Dong with her large beautiful eyes as she laughed gently while covering her mouth. She was the princess of the Thousand Lotus Empire that Ming Dong had met and killed a clone of in the Neptunian Divine Palace, Yun Xiaoyan. Ming Dong did not become interested at all when he looked at the beautiful Yun Xiaoyan beside him. Instead, his heart became filled with bitterness and helplessness, which mixed together in an indescribable mess. He could not help but think about what his 8th senior had said to him when he emerged from the Neptunian Divine Palace. Junior brother, your senior, I have a grasp over the way of fate. I can see the fates of many people, and even vaguely peer into the karma of a person's past life. In you and Yun Xiaoyan's past life, Yun Xiaoyan was deeply in love with you and once did many things for you. But you always let her down, deeply hurting her heart. In the end, Yun Xiaoyan died because of you. Her life ended because of you. The two of you having the chance to meet in this life might be the secret arrangement of the strands of fate. As a result, you can't let her down again in this life. The 8th Majesty did not tell him about what had happened between them in their past lives, because even she was only able to see the surface and not the full picture. However, just that was enough to make it no longer possible for Ming Dong to treat Yun Xiaoyan cruelly. 9th Majesty, secret arrangements are occurring in various places across the cloud plane. It's the calm before the storm. Something major might be about to happen. At this moment, a gleam of golden light flashed through the eyes of the scholarly, middle-aged man who followed Ming Dong every step along the way. Ming Dong dismissed his thoughts when he heard that. He said indifferently, I don't care what happens as long as the Tianyun clan is unscathed. Chapter 2209, Going to the Desolate Plain 1. The Azure Peng King hasn't followed us. It looks like we've shaken him off. Jianchen flew as quickly as he could with the Anata Tower through the danger-ridden spatial crack. He paid attention to the situation of the outside world at all times. He seems to be trapped in the temporal vortex. Temporal vortices really are extremely wondrous. The flow of time varies indefinitely. The Azure Peng King was not much slower than us in charging into the temporal vortex, but we were completely unaffected, while the Azure Peng King was trapped in there, said Jianchen. He glanced at the Anata Tower. He was uncertain whether it was because of luck or because the Anata Tower's quality was just too great that they managed to emerge from the temporal vortex unaffected. Or perhaps it was because of Jianchen himself. Although Jianchen had been hiding within the Anata Tower when they charged into the temporal vortex, he had experienced a wondrous feeling inside. During that moment, he felt like his soul had established an obscure connection with the chaotic laws of time in the temporal vortex, where he seemed to be able to sense their existence. However, because the Anata Tower had only stayed in the temporal vortex for a split second, and the laws there were extremely chaotic, he failed to gain any substantial benefits. That should be a part of luck. After all, I haven't grasped the laws of time, so it's impossible for me to affect the temporal vortex, thought Jianchen. It was so close before. Thankfully, we charged into the temporal vortex in time. And thankfully, the power of laws in there did not affect us. Otherwise, we would have been killed off by the power of time in the vortex before the Azure Peng King even caught up to us. Kaya patted her chest as she said gladly from beside Jianchen. She felt like she had just survived a disaster. Suddenly, Jianchen's face hardened. He looked at Kaya in confusion and said, "Oh right. Kaya, why were you able to detect the Azure Peng King sooner than me?" This had been puzzling Jianchen. He knew that Kaya was the same as him, where she could detect the situation outside. However, the sensitivity she previously demonstrated was actually even more terrifying than him, who was basically half a master of the Anata Tower. He struggled to accept this. Kaya furrowed her brows in thought. She had no idea how to explain this to Jianchen because even she did not understand why her soul had suddenly strengthened earlier. I don't know why. I just suddenly had that feeling. Kaya explained it like that after thinking for half a day. Jianchen nodded and no longer tried to pry anymore. He had begun suspecting that Kaya was the reincarnation of some expert from the various signs Kaya had shown since long ago. Naturally, he knew that this would be due to Kaya's former life. After all, even he had reincarnated. The sword spirits had wrapped around his soul and made him reborn on the Tianyun continent. Brother Jianchen, why have you come in here? At this moment, A delighted voice rang out from afar. The radiant God King in luxurious, white robes, Xianming, shot over from afar like a bolt of lightning as he shone with holy light. He arrived before Jianchen and Kaya in the blink of an eye, looking at the two of them with a face full of smiles. Sigh, we're currently being hunted down by the Azure Peng King. We fled into a spatial crack, and we had no other choice but to hide here. Jianchen sighed gently. His gaze toward Xianming and was slightly shameful. He knew that he had probably drawn Xianming into the matter now. After all, with the Azure Peng King's temperament, he probably would not spare Xianming once he found out that Xianming was connected to Jianchen, even if it was just through something insignificant. What? The Azure Peng King? One of the 4 heavenly kings of the Lone Heaven Plain, the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance Mountain, the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance? Xianming's face changed drastically as he paled in fright. That's right, it's him, said Jianchen. He had heard quite a few rumors regarding the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Peng King on planet Tianming. God damn it. Of all the people you could provoke, why the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance? I've heard my father mention the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance before. He said he's unruly, petty, and vengeful. He's known for being difficult to deal with in the saints' world. Not only is he powerful, but his speed is also known to be unmatched. Even peak experts with the laws of space can't necessarily capture him, unless they possess an absolute advantage in strength. There definitely won't be any good outcomes from offending the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance. We're in deep trouble now, Xianming growled with an ugly expression. Woes weighed on his heart. You don't need to worry too much. As long as you hide here without worrying, even if the tower ends up in the hands of the Azure Peng King, you'll be safe for some time. Moreover, the Azure Peng King should be trapped in a temporal vortex right now. It should be able to keep him trapped for a while, which will give us some time to catch our breaths, said Jianchen. He knew that the Anata Tower had been completely exposed after what happened on planet Tianming. According to his predictions, the experts of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing would hurry over very soon as long as no accidents happened. Let alone just a while, but even if it traps the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance for a few years or even a few decades, we won't be able to escape his pursuit with our strength. Xianming became restless like there were ants in his pants. He constantly paced around as he was filled with unease. Let's go to a place where even the Azure Peng King dares not make trouble, like one of the 7 sacred plains of the saints' world, Jianchen said calmly. The first place he thought of was the Prosper Plain where the Heavenly Palace of Bishing resided. The 7 sacred plains were supreme existences in the saints' world. Every single sacred plane had a grand Exalt, so the reason why they were sacred was completely because of the 7 grand Exalts. When he heard that, Xianming's face immediately lit up. He said excitedly, I know. I'll tell you a good place to go to. Don't go to the 7 sacred plains. Go to the Desolate Plain. Our Radiant Saint Hall just happens to reside on the Desolate Plain. Is the Desolate Plain safer than the 7 sacred plains? Jianchen was doubtful. Xianming sniggered and said with complete confidence, I knew you'd worry about that. But you don't need to worry at all. As long as you go to the Desolate Plain, the Azure Peng King won't be able to cause any trouble at all because the place is off limits for him. If he dares to set foot on the Desolate Plain, his own life will be in danger. Since your Desolate Plain has such an expert, why has your Radiant Saint Hall been forced into such a miserable state by the great demon you speak of? Jianchen asked. Xianming immediately deflated like a balloon from that. He sighed in dejection. He won't care about the matters of our Radiant Saint Hall, let alone right now, when it's just a few Radiant God Kings. Even if our entire Radiant Saint Hall is destroyed, many of the large organizations on the Desolate Plain wouldn't even bat an eye. No one is willing to provoke an expert like that just for us, including the organizations that we're on good terms with. Jianchen, let's go to the Desolate Plain. Since the Radiant Saint Hall is on the Desolate Plain, there's a reason why you have to go there, said Kaya. Chapter 22:10. Going to the Desolate Plain too, alright. The Desolate Plain it is then. Jianchen hesitated for a moment before agreeing. Indeed, there was a reason why he had to go to the Desolate Plain. The Radiant Saint Hall resided on the Desolate Plain. Ever since he came to the Saint's world, he had struggled to make any progress with his Radiant Saint force. Even now, his cultivation realm as a Radiant Saint Master remained at the same level as when he was on the Tianyun continent. It was not because he did not want to increase it. Rather, it was because he lacked the cultivation method. During this time, he had considered creating his own cultivation method, but the creation of each one would take a lengthy period of time. It required countless predictions and experiments before taking shape. As a result, creating a cultivation method clearly did not suit Jianqin. I have a star chart here. It accurately displays the locations of the 49 planes and 81 planets of the Saint's world, as well as some forbidden zones that you should never set foot in, said Xianming. Jianqin's decision to go to the Desolate Plain immediately delighted Xianming. Immediately, he gave Jianqin his star chart as if he was afraid that Jianqin would get lost. The Desolate Plain was Xianming's home, so Jianqin perfectly understood Xianming's feelings. He accepted the star chart from Xianming and said to Kaya, "Let's not tarry. We'll head there right now. We have to get to the Desolate Plain before the Azure Peng King breaks free." Afterwards, Jianqin piloted the Anata Tower in search of a way out. In the Saint's world, when he and Kaya combined their efforts, they could just barely rip open space. However, they dared not do that in the spatial crack, even when Jianqin's chaotic body had reached the 13th layer. This was because it was just too dangerous. Danger basically laid at every step. Even the slightest ripple of energy could set off a chain reaction and lead to even more severe danger. If they used their full strength here, terrifying consequences would have occurred before they could rip open space. After all, they did not possess strength as terrifying as the Azure Peng Kings, where he had no need to fear the threats here. As a result, they had to find another way out. However, Jianqin had the Anata Tower protecting him. As long as he did not go outside, he could go anywhere in the spatial crack. As a result, he found a crack that led to the outside world. The crack was very small, only a meter long. Without any hesitation, Jianqin immediately shrunk the Anata Tower to the size of a finger and charged out from the tiny crack. However, as soon as he returned to the Saint's world, pulses of powerful energy swept over. Nearby, a colossal space beast was engaged in an intense battle against a bloodied old man. Whether it was the space beast or the old man, they were both extremely powerful. The shockwaves of energy from their fight formed terrifying storms that swept through the sky, causing it to collapse and become covered with cracks. The Anata Tower charged out from one of those cracks. Jianqin did not stick his nose into the old man's business. He carefully hid and charged far away because the space beast and the old man were both existences that he could not deal with. The old man was completely suppressed by the space beast. He devoted his efforts to the battle, so he clearly failed to notice the tiny Anata Tower. In the end, Jianqin basically slipped away from right in front of them with the Anata Tower. Fortunately, we're close to planet Scarlet Cloud of the 81 planets. With our speed, we should be able to reach there in a day. Hopefully we can make it. Jianqin stowed the Anata Tower away and took out a small spaceship that Xianming had given him. He unfurled the star chart and hurried off to planet Scarlet Cloud full speed ahead. Xianming's spaceship was of impressive quality. It was extremely fast. In the end, the estimated day's journey was completed in just 4 hours. They arrived on the Scarlet Cloud Plain. This time, he did not have Kaya accompanying him. After disguising himself once again, he set foot on the planet alone. He directly made his way to a teleportation formation that could take people across planes. The Desolate Plain is 505 colored divine crystals per person. Remember, you can't have anything living in your spatial treasures. Once the formation senses something, there'll be severe consequences. A guard who managed the teleportation formations warned Jianqin sternly. Jianqin was secretly stunned when he heard the price. He knew that the price would be very high, so high that even a primordial realm expert would become troubled, but he had never thought it would be so high. 100 supreme quality divine crystals were only worth a single one-colored divine crystal. 10 one-colored divine crystals were worth a single two-colored divine crystal, while 10 two-colored divine crystals were worth a single three-colored divine crystal. This went on, so a single 5-colored divine crystal was equivalent to 10,000 one-colored divine crystals. If it was exchanged to supreme quality divine crystals, a single 5-colored divine crystal would be equivalent to 1,000,000 supreme quality divine crystals. Yet a single teleportation cost 500 of them. It simply had to be mentioned that the price for teleportation this time was exorbitant. Jianchen gasped. He handed over 500 5-colored divine crystals rather painfully before entering the teleportation emotionlessly. The guards near the teleportation formation all paid close attention to Jianchen. Along the way to the teleportation formation, there were special formations that could check whether people were carrying anything living in their spatial treasures. Basically, all the people who controlled planar teleportation formations in the Saints' world would forbid people from carrying anything living with them for the sake of profit. It would not affect the stability of the formation at all. It was purely for profit. It was also because of this reason that many rather powerful clans and organizations would rather take an arduous journey through space on a spaceship than to take teleportation formations. However, Jianchen was not worried about the formations discovering that he carried other with him. The Anata Tower was an impressive god artifact after all. It could not be discovered through any old formation. Even Qing Yishuan and Heya had been shifted from the Divine Hall into the Anata Tower. In the end, Jianchen passed through the formation successfully and left planet Scarlet Cloud to go to the Desolate Plain. When Jianchen left planet Scarlet Cloud, the Azure Peng King finally charged out of the temporal vortex in the spatial crack. He could see that the Anata Tower had already vanished, so his expression became extremely ugly. Even its traces have vanished. It looks like I've been trapped for quite some time. However, I have a droplet of your blood, so no matter where you go, you can't escape from me, the Azure Peng King said through gritted teeth. In a primarily pink, warmly decorated room of the Tianyun clan, Xiaoling and Xiaojin sat at a table. They ate fruit as they talked to each other leisurely. At this moment, a black-robed old man with an ordinary appearance appeared behind Xiaoling silently like a ghost. The first to discover the old man was Xiaojin, who sat opposite to Xiaoling suddenly. His eyes narrowed, and he immediately stood up. He called out, "Who are you?" The old man was amiable. He looked at Xiaoling curiously, but he felt confused inside. He thought, "This girl is only at reciprocity, so why has Master sent me personally to receive her?" "Wah. Grandpa, who are you? How did you get in here?" Xiaoling also discovered the old man behind her. Her pure little face was filled with surprise. The old man said nothing. He did not give off any presence either, such that he seemed ordinary. He studied Xiaoling for a while before carefully taking out a lock of hair. He held the lock of hair with both hands as if it was extremely important. Even respect filled his face. Chapter 22:11. Heavenless takes action. However, the instant Xiaoling saw the lock of hair, she became stunned. Her large, bright, and pure eyes stared at the lock of black hair that the black-robed old man held with both hands. Gradually, her eyes turned red as tears pooled up rapidly. In the next moment, Xiaoling suddenly broke out into tears. Tears ran down her face along with memories. "Master! Master, where are you? Have you abandoned Xiaoling? Have you forgotten Xiaoling? Xiaoling really misses you so much." Xiaoling took the lock of hair from the old man's hands and pressed it against her face gently as she sobbed with a heavy sense of longing. Xiaojin, who stood to one side, could not endure it when he saw how sorrowful Xiaoling had become. Suddenly he looked at the old man of unknown origins and asked, "Where did you get the lock of hair from?" Xiaojin had spent so much time with Xiaoling naturally. He knew that his sister Xiaoling had a master in the past. Now that he saw Xiaoling suddenly remember her master from the lock of hair, he naturally understood that the lock of hair came from Xiaoling's master. The old man ignored Xiaojin. Currently, Xiaojin was basically non-existent in his eyes. He did not raise the old man's attention at all. He directed all his attention towards Xiaoling, who held the lock of hair as she sobbed. "Little sister, sense it closely. Is the presence on the lock of hair really your master's? Are you completely certain?" The old man asked carefully. His gaze towards Xiaoling became extremely strange. "It can't be wrong. It can't be wrong. This is my master's presence." This is my master's presence. It's impossible for me to get my master's presence wrong, Xiaoling said with absolute confidence. With tears on her cheeks, she looked at the old man hopefully and sobbed. Grandpa, please tell me where you got my master's hair from. Please. I really want to see my master. Xiaoling was basically begging. Her longing for her master had basically accumulated over 1,000,000 years. Even when she came to the saint's world with Jianqin, her primary objective was to find her master. This was because in Xiaoling's life, her master was like her father. He was an extremely important figure in her life that no one could replace. The old man sucked in a deep breath, and his gaze toward Xiaoling changed drastically. Only after a while of silence did he say, I am Chengming, a servant of my master. You can directly call me by my name. The lock of hair came from my master, and he gave it to me. He sent me to the cloud plane in search of you with the lock of hair. He wanted me to take you away. If you want to see your master, please come with me. Is your master Tianyun? Xiao Jin asked as he stared at Chengming in shock. Xiao Jin was not unfamiliar with Tianyun. He was a legendary figure in the history of the Tianyuan continent, one of the 4 champions of the ancient times. His renown had lasted for 1,000,000 years, affecting generations to come. Chengming frowned. He glanced at Xiao Jin with quite some displeasure and said coldly, I dare not discuss about my master's name so casually. Do not ask for it recklessly. All right. I'll go with you. I want to see my master soon. However, I have to take brother Xiao Jin with me, Xiaoling immediately replied. Her master's position in her heart was unshakable. No one could replace him. Now that she had finally received news of her master, she was tempted to fly to his side immediately. Of course. We'll set off immediately. Go bid farewell to your friends outside, just in case it leads to some misunderstanding. Chengming said and glanced outside. Xiaoling nodded. Suddenly, her heart began to burn warmly as she ran out eagerly and excitedly. She wanted to bid farewell to the people of the Tianyuan clan. However, as soon as Xiaoling opened the door, she discovered a middle-aged, scholarly man in white robes standing at the doorway. Xiaoling almost ran into him. Behind the middle-aged man were Mingdong and Yin Xiaoyan. Why have you come here? Xiaoling wiped away her tears and asked in surprise. How can I not worry when an uninvited guest barges into the Tianyuan clan and directly enters Sister Xiaoling's room? Mingdong said from behind the middle-aged man. Suddenly he looked behind Xiaoling. He looked at the black-robed Chengming, who made his way over steadily, and he became stern. He said coldly, Who are you? State your intentions. Seeing that the person who spoke was actually Mingdong, Chengming revealed a smear of surprise. He looked at Mingdong deeply before pointing at Xiaoling. My master is her master. I've come under my master's orders to take her away. Your master is Tianyun? Mingdong's eyes narrowed. As soon as Tianyun was mentioned, he could not help but become stern. He asked, How can you prove it? I can prove it. The presence from this lock of hair belongs to my master. It's impossible for me to get my master's presence wrong. I want to see my master immediately, Xiaoling said eagerly. Afterwards, she immediately ran past the middle-aged man and headed towards the people she was familiar with in the Tianyuan clan to bid farewell to them. I wonder where Senior Tianyun is and how I can find him. I'd like to visit him in person. Mingdong also clasped his hands towards Chengming after Xiaoling left. Clearly, he believed this person slightly. He knew the old man before him had a very powerful cultivation, such that the divine general beside him had to face him sternly. Experts like that would not lower themselves by lying. Mingdong was filled with admiration towards Tianyun. He came from the Tianyuan continent as well after all, so he had heard many rumors about Tianyun. Tianyun had been a great impact on him. Please forgive me for being unable to answer your question. I can only pass on your message to Master, said Chengming. Afterwards, Mingdong tried to learn some things about Tianyun from Chengming again, but Chengming kept his mouth shut tight, so Mingdong failed to learn anything. As a matter of fact, Chengming never even admitted that his master was the Tianyun Mingdong mentioned. He always referred to him as master. All right, let's go. I want to see my master quick, Very soon, Xiaoling ran back with lightning speed. Her sudden departure had alarmed many important people of the Tianyun clan. Not only had the greatest elder of the Tianyun clan, Shiyu, personally come, but even Sacred Feather came. Chengming nodded. Without saying anything more, he gently swung his sleeve and disappeared with Xiaoling and Xiaojin. Who is he? Not only am I unable to sense his cultivation at all, but I also felt nothing when he barged into the Tianyun clan. An old man behind Shiyu said in complete surprise after the two of them had vanished. He was a subject of the Shi Empire and an infinite prime. He had been specially sent by the Shi Emperor to protect Shiyu. He has already reached the peak of chaotic prime, and is only a step away from grand prime. Naturally, you won't be able to sense him, said the middle-aged man who followed Mingdong. What? Peak chaotic prime? All the upper echelon of the Tianyun clan paled in fright. They were utterly shocked. Uncle Ming, have you heard of the name Mo Tianyun before? Mingdong asked the divine general. The middle-aged man referred to as Uncle Ming shook his head. I've never heard of this name before. However, seeing how he can have a peak chaotic prime as a servant, he must be a grand prime and an extremely powerful one at that. Perhaps Mo Tianyun is not his real name. He might have another name in the saints' world. Chengming had already left the cloud plane with Xiaoling and Xiaojin. He hurried through outer space. He did not use any spaceships. Instead, he walked leisurely, like he was strolling through space. He moved extremely quickly, passing a world with each step. The stars around him changed rapidly, and in just a few steps, the tremendous cloud plane had become the size of a hand, hovering in outer space silently. Hee. I never thought the Grand Elder of the Empyrean Demon Cult and the War Demon, one of the 5 infamous generals, would actually come to the cloud plane personally. Since you've come, why leave in such a hurry? At this moment, cold laughter rang out in outer space. A huge cloud of demonic aura churned before Chengming, giving off a terrifying, devastating presence. The Heavenless demon Exalt. Chengming stopped. He glared at the cloud of demonic aura, and called out as his face sank. Beside Chengming, the war demon who accompanied him appeared. He stared at the churning black cloud sternly and growled. This Heavenless demon Exalt has come with ill intentions. Grand Elder, you leave with them first. I'll cover you. Chapter 22:12. The Grand Elder's death. Chengming became extremely stern. When he came here, he felt an ill foreboding. Now that the Heavenless demon Exalt had suddenly blocked his path, Chengming sensed that the situation was bad. I should remain behind and fight him to the death with you. But Master has ordered that I must take the girl back safely, so I can't let anything happen to her. War demon, be careful. Remember, do not try to take him on forcefully, and you have to leave a fragment of your soul intact no matter what so that Master can revive you in the future. Chengming warned before using a secret technique and charging off in the other direction as quickly as possible. Grand Elder, I've come especially for you, so how can you just turn around and leave without saying anything? Am I really that scary? The Heavenless demon Exalt snickered. As he said that, a terrifying demonic aura erupted, causing space to crack and the stars around them to dim. It condensed into a huge hand that reached towards Chengming. When the hand fell, endless energy surged out, sealing up the region and causing Chengming to pause. At the same time, he slowed down as if some invisible energy had restrained him. War blood ignition. At this moment, the war demon bellowed out furiously. With a tremendous presence, he used a god-tier battle skill. All the vital energies within him rose, and a black flame sprang up on him as he directly hurled out a fist. This punch was astonishing, swinging out like it was unstoppable. It shattered the starry space, causing the galaxies to vanish. At the same time, Chengming fought back with his full strength when he saw how the Heavenless demon Exalt had restrained him. He completely unleashed his strength as a peak chaotic prime, and directly used a god-tier battle skill, employing his strongest attack at the hand condensed from demonic aura. Chengming and the war demon's full-powered strikes struck the Heavenless demon Exalt's hand at basically the same time, erupting with a deafening boom. The clash this time was truly devastating. Regions of space collapsed one after another, truly being reduced to void. However, the difference in strength was still far too great. Not only did they fail to stop the Heavenless demon Exalt's seemingly casual strike with their full strength, but they also became heavily injured instead when the hand condensed from demonic aura struck them. Bang! The war demon was struck first. His entire body shattered, exploding into a bloody rain in outer space. His body was destroyed, and only a soul that did not shine particularly brightly was left behind. Cheng Ming's situation was not any better. The medium-quality god artifact armor he wore had dimmed while his face had completely paled. His entire right arm had vanished. Cheng Ming and the war demon were only chaotic primes, while the Heavenless demon Exalt was a fourth heavenly layer Grand Prime, a mid-Grand Prime. The difference in strength was simply too great such that they were on completely different levels. As a result, the battle became completely one-sided. Grand Elder, go! The war demon called out miserably. His dim soul suddenly lit up brightly, while all the blood scattered there was ignited in that instance as well. Black, demonic flames sprang up, gathering together from all directions and charging towards the Heavenless demon Exalt fearlessly. Boom! Suddenly, a great sound rang out. The war demon's soul and his blood all unleashed an astonishing might, surrounding the Heavenless demon Exalt and blowing up. This time, no energy was released. Even the deafening boom only lasted for a single instance before vanishing. The scene the war demon's self-destruction created was just too terrifying. A gaping black hole formed in the space, there, greedily devouring everything present. Whether it was light or energy, the black hole had devoured it all. War demon! Cheng Ming called out sorrowfully. He looked at the small black hole in the distance as hatred filled his eyes. Afterwards, he turned around to leave, unwilling to waste any time at all. Your self-destruction is indeed powerful. It can probably injure first heavenly layer Grand Primes and threaten second heavenly layer Grand Primes, but to me, it's still far, far too weak, said the Heavenless demon Exalt. He stood near the black hole, and he did not waver at all no matter how hard the hole sucked. Even his clothes did not flutter. He swung his hand gently and used his hand to rub space. As if the hole had experienced an unimaginable pressure, it collapsed loudly. Grand Elder, give me the method of how your Empyrean demon cult refines blood and soul beads. I'll let you go if you do. The Heavenless demon Exalt said steadily. Having reached the fourth heavenly layer of Grand Prime, he was now the undisputed greatest expert on the cloud plane. He had completely stopped fearing the Great Elder behind the Empyrean demon cult. This was because in his eyes, the Great Elder was only a third heavenly layer Grand Prime at most. Even if he could make some progress and reach the fourth heavenly layer, he would only be at the same level as the Heavenless demon Exalt. Moreover, there was another reason why he dared to attack the Empyrean demon cult. This reason was that he possessed reliable information that only the Great Elder was a Grand Prime in the Empyrean demon cult, while he, the Heavenless demon Exalt, was not alone. He still had the Tian Empire behind him as well as the Peak clans that had banded together with the Tian Empire. His Tian clan had already gathered around half of the Peak powers across the cloud plane now. Heavenless demon Exalt, you will suffer a horrible fate by opposing our Empyrean demon cult. Master will not spare you. Cheng Ming bellowed out furiously before directly fleeing into a spatial crack. If that's the case, die. As for your Great Elder, I'll naturally try him after we conquer the cloud plane. I'll get the method of refining blood and soul beads from him. The Heavenless demon Exalt said coldly. A demonic presence wrapped around him, and he also entered the spatial crack, pointing at Cheng Ming who was fleeing for his life from afar. In the next moment, endless demonic aura suddenly surged out from around Cheng Ming. It wrapped around his body and were like maggots that devoured his flesh at a visible rate. There seemed to be a dense swarm of demonic insects in the demonic aura. I can't just let your body and soul go to waste like the war demons. They're perfect for feeding my demonic soul beetles. The Heavenless demon Exalt smirked viciously. Heavenless demon Exalt, just you wait for my master's wrath. Cheng Ming was not hesitant with his decision. Immediately, he abandoned his body and fled with his soul and a divine hall. The Heavenless demon Exalt's eyes lit up slightly when he saw the divine hall Cheng Ming tried to take away with him. He smiled gently. You don't even want your space ring, yet you want the divine hall. It looks like the Divine Hall is extremely important to you. The Heavenless demon Exalt extended his hand from afar. Demonic aura surged and formed a huge hand once again, destroying the spatial storms and streaks of energy along the way to grab Chengming's soul in a brutal fashion. Afterwards, the hand closed slightly, and Chengming's soul immediately began to collapse. It turned into specks of light in the spatial crack, gradually dispersing. The Heavenless demon Exalt ignored Chengming. In his eyes, Chengming was already dead. He looked at the Divine Hall and showed interest. Afterwards, he used 2 fingers to pinch the fist-sized Divine Hall, and with a slight exertion of force, the Divine Hall immediately shattered, revealing Xiaojin and Xiaoling that Chengming had let in there. Who are you? Where's Grandpa Chengming? Xiaoling looked at the Heavenless demon Exalt, who churned with demonic aura in confusion as she asked fearfully. She sensed a frightening presence from the Heavenless demon Exalt. Xiaojin also stood next to Xiaoling uneasily. He looked at the Heavenless demon Exalt closely and said nothing. The presence that the Heavenless demon Exalt gave off terrified him. Looking at Xiaojin and Xiaoling, who had suddenly appeared before him with disappointing cultivation, the Heavenless demon Exalt was clearly surprised. He felt very confused or even disbelief. The Grand Elder of the Empyrean demon cult did not even want his space ring, using all the power of his soul to flee with the Divine Hall. Clearly, the Divine Hall must have contained something extremely important. The Heavenless demon Exalt even suspected that the Grand Elder had come to the Cloud Plane this time, because of what was in the Divine Hall. However, why did 2 brats with an embarrassing level of cultivation appear before him? Has the Grand Elder come especially for the 2 of you? The Heavenless demon Exalt sank into his thoughts. He became more and more certain before smiling coldly in the end. Hehehe, if that's the case, I'll keep the 2 of you for now. Maybe you'll be of great use in the future. With a wave of his hand, the Heavenless demon Exalt disappeared from the spatial crack with Xiaojin and Xiaoling. Chapter 22:13. The Great Elder. After the Heavenless demon Exalt departed, a weak speck of light suddenly appeared with an extremely weak mental pulse in the spatial crack. This was a fragment of the Grand Elder's soul. Although the Heavenless demon Exalt had crushed Chengming's soul, causing it to disperse and vanish in the chaotic spatial crack, Chengming did not truly die. He used a secret technique from his master to save a fragment of his soul. With a flash, the fragment of Chengming's soul vanished. The white-robed, sagely Lord of the Heavens Link Peak, and 6 other people of various ages currently sat around an extremely precious table made from white jade on the top of Heaven's Link Peak. He discussed the plans to fend off the Tian Empire with them. The 6 people who sat on the same table as the Lord concealed their presence, without letting any of it leak out. As such, they seemed just like ordinary people. However, they were actually peak experts who stood at the apex of the cloud plane. They were terrifying figures where the entire cloud plane would shake if they stamped their feet. The Heavenless demon Exalt has already killed the Grand Elder of the Empyrean demon cult, as well as the war demon of the 5 generals. It looks like the Heavenless demon Exalt is confident in dealing with the Great Elder who rarely shows himself, said an extremely ordinary old man. His was extremely old, where his back was hunched, and his face was filled with wrinkles. He seemed like he was about to pass away from old age. This old man was the ancestor of the Tong family, one of the peak clans of the Cloud Plane. He was Tong Wuming. The more powerful the Heavenless demon Exalt is, the worse our position is. He does not fear the Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult, which is not good news for us, said a middle-aged man in green clothes. He had a resolute face. He was the ancestor of the God Fallen clan, Luomantion. The God's Fallen clan was also one of the peak organizations of the Cloud Plane. They were located in the northern region. In my opinion, this is the Heavenless demon Exalt showing off his strength to us. He has killed the Grand Elder of the Empyrean demon cult with lightning speed, showing us his strength through how he does not fear the Empyrean demon cult at all. He's warning us to not put up futile resistance, growled another old man. His complexion was not fantastic. He was the ancestors of the Fire God clan, Lian Wuji. Peak Lord, may I ask how confident you are in defeating the Heavenless demon Exalt? The founding ancestor of the Cosmic Sect, Zhou Zhidao asked. All the people seated there looked at the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak after hearing Zhou Zhidao's question. The Lord of Heaven's Link Peak was a peak 3rd heavenly layer Grand Prime. He used to hold the position of the most powerful on the cloud plane. He was a prestigious person on the cloud plane who many peak clans respected. On the current cloud plane, if there was someone who had the right to put up a fight against the Heavenless demon Exalt, it would definitely be the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak. This was because all the other Grand Primes on the cloud plane were at the 1st or 2nd heavenly layers. Their strength differed from the 4th heavenly layer Heavenless demon Exalt by far too much. The eyes of the Peak Lord had always remained fixated on outer space, where the Grand Elder and the Heavenless demon Exalt fought. It was extremely distant from the cloud plane, so distant that even the tremendous cloud plane would seem like a hand-sized piece of land floating in space. It had surpassed the range that chaotic primes could sense. Only Grand Primes could observe everything that happened there. A strange light flickered through the Peak Lord's eyes. He said, I have complete confidence in defeating him when we were at the same level of cultivation, but now that he has reached the 4th heavenly layer before me, there's no chance for me to defeat him when I meet him next time. I can only keep him busy for a while at most, but I will still suffer defeat once it gets drawn out. Then what should we do? The Tian Empire already possesses 3 Grand Primes. They also have some peak clans who stand with them. In terms of peak experts, we're completely outmatched in terms of numbers. And once you throw the Heavenless demon Exalt into the equation, Sai, the founding ancestor of the cosmic sect, Zhou Zhidao, let out a long sigh. He was worried. Apart from the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak, all the ancestors who gathered there had heavy hearts. The situation before them was not optimistic. Do we really have to yield to them? Do we really have to follow them in the future? Luomantion of the God-fallen clan sighed gently. All the people present were experts who reigned over an entire region. They had grown accustomed to being able to order people after spending so much time in a position of power. Now that they had to serve someone else, they all struggled to accept it. On the other hand, the Peak Lord remained calm. He said, You don't need to worry. There's no need for us to worry about the Heavenless demon Exalt anymore. Why do you say that, Peak Lord? The Lord of Heaven's Link Peak pointed at outer space, where the Heavenless demon Exalt had stopped the Grand Elder. The Heavenless demon Exalt has completely offended the Empyrean demon cult now. Moreover, he seems to have taken something extremely important from the hands of the Grand Elder. I believe that before long, the Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult will come to the cloud plane in person. Can the Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult stop the Heavenless demon Exalt? The eyes of all the peak experts there narrowed. The Lord of Heaven's Link Peak seemed to think of someone that he had personally witnessed in the past from that. Immediately, fear flooded his eyes, and he said, You underestimate the Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult far too much. He's far more terrifying than you imagine him to be. Since the Heavenless demon Exalt has offended the Great Elder, his fate has become determined. The priority for us right now is to stop the advances of the Tian Empire before the Great Elder arrives. But just in case, I'd recommend everyone to have some clansmen retreat from the cloud plane, so that you have some survivors if anything goes bad. If that's the case, I'll go back and arrange it immediately. We will formally come into conflict with the Tian clan very soon, so we don't have much time left. I hope that the mysterious Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult can make it in time. In an unknown space of the Saints' world, the soul fragment of the Grand Elder entered a majestic divine hall with a flash. Master. Very soon, Chengming's soul fragment arrived before a closed secret room. He turned into a fist-sized figure, and knelt before the room as he trembled. What has happened? A serious voice rang out from the secret room. We were attacked by the Heavenless demon Exalt. Chengming gave a simple explanation of what happened. Rumble. The door to the secret room opened slowly, and immediately, a cold power of slaughter radiated out. A black-robed, middle-aged man with a striking appearance walked out. His face was sunken. He stared at Chengming's soul fragment sharply and growled. What about the person I got you to bring? She has been taken by the Heavenless demon Exalt, Chengming said fearfully. The Heavenless demon Exalt. In that instance, The middle-aged man's gaze became extremely terrifying and shocking. Killing intent radiated from him, and even his eyes became bloodshot from bloodlust. At that moment he seemed to have become a bloodthirsty beast. Chengming, who knelt in the air as a soul fragment, became filled with fear and unease. He had followed his master for so many years, but he had never seen his master so angered. I can't wait any longer. My original body has to break free immediately. The middle-aged man's face was sunken. He let Chengming leave to rebuild his body before turning around and entering the secret room again. The door closed once more. At the same time, there was a barren planet of deathly silence in an extremely distant region of space. A middle-aged man who seemed exactly the same as the master Chengming spoke of sat underground in white robes. Suddenly, the person's eyes snapped open. An intense killing intent flashed through them. Then he took a step and vanished immediately. When he appeared once again, he was in outer space. He closed his eyes and sensed for something silently before shooting off in a certain direction. Chapter 22:14. Hallowed Saint Masters Jianchen had already arrived on the desolate plain now. Currently he was in a luxurious inn within the central region. He had ordered some dishes and ate by himself. Many people ate in the inn. They enjoyed their alcohol as they discussed with one another loudly in great interest. They talked about the various interesting matters that had occurred on the desolate plain, as well as various rumors that they had heard. Jianchen had already gained a rough understanding of the desolate plain from Xianming. However, it had already been far too long since Xianming had returned to the desolate plain, so he only learnt about some very old matters from Xianming. As a result, Jianchen needed to acquire some new knowledge about the current desolate plain. After all, he did not plan on staying here for just a few days. If nothing went wrong, he would be on the desolate plain for quite a long time. In 3 years, the Radiant Saint Hall will select a new chosen saint. I wonder who will become the chosen saint this time. It's said that there are 5 geniuses with 9-star talent in the Radiant Saint Hall right now. 3 of them have gone from being a Class 1 Radiant Saint Master to Class 9 in just 1,000 years. It's said that they're all trying to comprehend the second law of being a Radiant Saint Master, the laws of the Hallowed, to become a Hallowed Saint Master. It shouldn't take long for them to become extremely powerful Hallowed Saint Masters. Hallowed Saint Masters are existences with extremely great battle prowess. They rarely have any opponents at the same level of cultivation. Only those supreme prodigies raised by great organizations have the right to rival them. Hehe, the heavens are fair. Even though Hallowed Saint Masters have very powerful battle prowess, there's a price for them to pay as well. And that's the great difficulty in making any progress. How long do you think the 3 9-star geniuses who reached Class 9 in just a millennia will take before they comprehend the second law of Radiant Saint Masters and become a Hallowed Saint Master? At this moment, the discussion to one side raised Jianchen's attention. He turned his head slightly and glanced at them very casually. They were a group of young people in white robes, which he identified to be Radiant Saint Masters with a single glance. They discussed the matters of Radiant Saint Masters enthusiastically. Jianchen was not unfamiliar with the chosen saint and 9-star geniuses. He had already understood it from Xianming. The chosen saint was the most outstanding person selected from all the Radiant Saint Masters of the Radiant Saint Hall, through various means of elimination and selection. This person would then be raised into the leader of the younger generation with the most authority. Moreover, they would have all the resources and the full support of the Radiant Saint Hall. Once a chosen saint was selected, they would be an existence that stood above almost everyone in the Radiant Saint Hall. Not only would they be a representation of status and authority, but they would also have an exceptional future paved for them, possessing extremely great room for growth and future glory. However, it would be extremely difficult to become the chosen saint. In the past, even with Xianming's talent, he had no right to be chosen. As for the 9-star geniuses, it was a form of measurement for the talent of Radiant Saint Masters. Every single person who could be called a genius possessed extraordinary talent. They would be a 1-star genius at the very least, and it could range to as high as a 9-star genius. Even 1-star geniuses would have a certain amount of status in the Radiant Saint Hall. They would receive superior treatment, which could not be compared to regular disciples. As for Hallowed Saint Masters, they were like Xian Ming, who had grasped the trick to change Radiant Saint Force. As a result, not only did it possess healing qualities, but it also possessed great offensive power. Right now, Jianchen was only a Class 9, Radiant Saint Master at most. He was not a Hallowed Saint Master. After remaining there for a little longer, Jianchen realized that he could not obtain any more useful information. As such, he left some high-grade divine crystals and left the inn. He had a basic understanding of the Desolate Plain situation. It was also split into 5 major regions, and the Radiant Saint Hall resided in the central region. It was not far from where he was right now. Jianchen directly made his way to the Radiant Saint Hall. He discovered many wanted posters stuck around the streets. Unsurprisingly, he was there. However, the person who had published them was only the solitary sword ancestor. The Azure Peng King's wanted posters did not seem to reach the Desolate Plain yet. Apart from him, there was also a young man who was wanted. His image was stuck all over the streets and alleyways. The young man was called Qingshan. He was handsome and only seemed to be 25 or 26. The people who had published the posters were the Radiant Saint Hall. Qingshan comes from the Martial Soul Mountain, ranked first on the God King's throne. Jianchen's gaze darkened when he saw Qingshan's introduction. When he had just come to the Desolate Plain, he had already heard of the Martial Soul lineage. They were hostile to the Radiant Saint Hall, where the two of them were basically arch-enemies. The reason why Qingshan was wanted by the Radiant Saint Hall was because he killed a Hallowed Saint Master, who had condensed a soul tree from the Radiant Saint Hall. The cultivation system of Radiant Saint Masters was different from fighters. Hallowed Saint Masters who had condensed soul trees were akin to primordial realm experts. There are rarely any opponents of Hallowed Saint Masters at the same level of cultivation as them. Yet a Hallowed Saint Master who has condensed a soul tree and reached the primordial realm was slain by Qingshan, a mere God King. Qingshan truly deserves the position of first on the God King's throne, Jianchen thought. He could not help but compare Qingshan to Shui Yunlan. Shui Yunlan was also known to be invincible among God Kings. Her strength had been fully revealed in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Jianchen stopped when he passed by the center of the city. He stared ahead. There was a flight of stairs completely constructed from sword chi. It led towards the sky, heading into the depths of the clouds. Quite a few people had gathered at the bottom of the sword chi stairs. From time to time, a few young prodigies would step onto the stairs with determination and burning desire, doing everything they could to reach the end. The stairs formed from sword chi were known as the Path of Swords. It was rumored that the Path of Swords had already existed on the Desolate Plain for hundreds of thousand years. It was so well known that its name was not restricted to the Desolate Plain. It had even spread to other planes. This was because the Path of Swords was a test personally set down by the Celestial Sword Saint. It was once said that someone made it to the end of the Path of Swords, they would have the right to be accepted as the Celestial Sword Saint's disciple. The Celestial Sword Saint was referred to people as a saint on the Desolate Plain, so his strength was evident. Jianchen stopped before the Path of Swords for a very long time. He silently sensed the incredible sword intent that radiated from the stairs before leaving in the end. Before long, he arrived at the Radiant Saint Hall. "I want to join the Radiant Saint Hall." Jianchen directly stated his intentions. Chapter 22:15. One-star genius. This was only a branch of the Radiant Saint Hall. The people responsible for recording down the new disciples were a few women in white clothes with a special badge from the Radiant Saint Hall. The women did not seem old. From their appearances alone, the youngest seemed to be 16 or 17, while the oldest were only in their early 20s. They were all pretty, which was pleasant to the eye. Of course, who knows how long they had actually cultivated for already. This is a testing medallion. Record the information about your identity onto your testing medallion, and then go get tested with the medallion. The person who received Jianchen was a young woman who seemed to be 17 or 18. She took out a medallion that was 3 fingers wide with great familiarity, and passed it to Jianchen. The medallion was created from jade. Not only was it tough, but it could also store information. Things could be recorded in there through the soul. Jianchen took his medallion and directly made his way to the testing grounds. When he arrived at the testing grounds, over 100 Radiant Saint Masters were already scattered there. They were either nervous and unsettled or waiting eagerly as they rubbed their hands. They all looked at a white, jade pillar up ahead with varying gazes. The jade pillar was 100 feet high and as thick as a water tank. It was covered with inscriptions. Who knew how many formations were engraved on it? The jade pillar seemed like just a supporting body for the formations. The jade pillar was especially used to test the talent of Radiant Saint Masters. This was an important process that all people who wanted to join the Radiant Saint Hall had to go through. It had a direct correlation to their future. This was because greater talent discovered through the tests meant that the status enjoyed after joining the Radiant Saint Hall would be greater as well. A good starting point meant more room for growth in the future. Jiangcheng mid-grade talent, Phineas low-grade talent, Dracula low-grade talent, Xianjiang high-grade talent. As the white pillar constantly flickered with a light of varying brightness, the old man responsible for the testing constantly called out their level of talent. Jianchen discovered from close observation that lighting up 30 feet or less of the pillar was low-grade talent, while beyond that was mid-grade talent. If someone could exceed 60 feet, it would be high-grade talent. Most of the people here possess low or mid-grade talent. Very few of the people present had high-grade talent. But at this moment, the white pillar suddenly began to shine with blinding light. The dazzling light on the pillar reached 9 feet in a single instance before rising by another foot before stopping. In the end, the light stopped at 91 feet, and it no longer shone with just white. It had become multicolored. A one-star genius. It's actually a female genius. Cries immediately rang out. The people gathered there all showed envy. Jianchen also looked over and discovered a pretty woman who seemed to be in her 20s standing before the white pillar. Her facial features were delicate, and she was beautiful. Her large, onyx-like eyes blinked constantly as if they were trying to say something. She wore white robes, which indicated that she was a Radiant Saint Master. She looked at the top of the white pillar, at the light that had only reached 91 feet. She frowned slightly as if she was rather dissatisfied with the result. Baiyu one-star genius. The old man who was responsible for the testing finally smiled. He nodded at Baiyu amiably and said, "Baiyu, congratulations. From today onwards, you are a one-star genius of our Radiant Saint Hall." Afterwards, Baiyu was taken away by an envoy in black clothes. As long as a prodigious talent was found, even if they were only the lower, one-star geniuses, their treatment would differ drastically from ordinary disciples. Ordinary disciples, even those with high-grade talent, all had to wait here after the testing. Only starred geniuses would be immediately taken to the Radiant Saint Hall by envoys. Afterwards, the testing continued. After testing over a dozen people, the white pillar finally shone brightly once again. The intense white light rose even faster than when Baiyu was being tested. It basically reached a height of 90 feet in a single instance, turning it multicolored. The light did not just stop at 91 feet like during Baiyu's testing. It passed 91 feet very soon, and approached the 92nd feet. In the end, the colorful light stopped at 95 feet. It was close to the 96th feet. A 5-star genius. It's actually a 5-star genius. This time, the old man could not help but cry out in excitement. Whether it was the ordinary disciples waiting to one side, or the Radiant Saint Masters waiting to be tested, they all looked at the 5-star genius with envy. There were even quite a few women among them who revealed great, undisguised admiration. Even Jianchen could not help but glance over curiously. It was an extremely handsome young man around the same age as him. He had already lifted his hand away from the jade pillar, and he stood confidently with his hands behind his back. He was proud of himself. Zhuofeng, 5-star genius. After sucking in a deep breath, the old man announced excitedly. Afterwards, another black-clothed envoy took Zhuofeng away extremely politely. A while later after Zhuofeng, it was finally Jianchen's turn. Jianchen walked over eagerly. He passed his medallion to the old man, and looked at the white pillar calmly. "You're called Changyang, right? Place your hand on the testing stone, and then condense Radiant Saint Force with all your efforts." You don't need to worry about your class as a Radiant Saint Master affecting the testing stone. The testing stone only tests a person's talent. It has nothing to do with one's cultivation level, explained the old man. Thank you for telling me, Senior. Junior understands. Jianchen clasped his fist at the old man before looking at the white pillar. After a period of silence, he gently pressed his hand onto the jade pillar and began to condense Radiant Saint Force slowly. Immediately, white light began to rise up from the base of the pillar. It did not move very quickly. Instead, it advanced at an extremely steady pace. It passed by 30 feet and 60 feet very soon. In the end, the Radiant Saint Force Jianchen had condensed made the light reach 91 feet. A one-star genius should be about enough. Jianchen paid attention to the light on the pillar at all times. After stabilizing it at 91 feet, he acted like he was out of power and stopped. This was not Jianchen's limit. He had purposefully suppressed himself during the testing and stopped after reaching the level of a one-star genius. He understood that his identity was sensitive, so he could not simply show off in the Radiant Saint Hall and attract too much attention. He only needed to establish an identity that was enough to cultivate in the Radiant Saint Hall. The identity of a one-star genius just happened to be around average in the Radiant Saint Hall. It could fulfill his needs without attracting too much attention. Changyang one-star genius, the old man announced in high spirits. He had discovered 3-star genius in a single stroke. It was quite the merit for him. Afterwards, Jianchen was also taken away by a black-clothed envoy to the Radiant Saint Hall. Chapter 22:16. One-colored Soulcore. A layer of milky white light from the envoy surrounded Jianchen. Afterwards, he was taken away from the city at the envoy's full speed, which also happened to be extremely slow in Jianchen's eyes. The black-clothed envoy was clearly a hallowed Saint Master. He was cool, expressionless and silent. He did not talk to Jianchen at all, only focusing on the journey. Jianchen said nothing as well. He had closed his eyes now, silently sensing the envoy's usage and grasp over Radiant Saint Force to comprehend the wonders within it. The envoy's cultivation was only equivalent to an early overgod. In the eyes of someone who could kill primordial realm experts like Jianchen, such cultivation was basically as insignificant as an ant. However, the envoy's achievements with Radiant Saint Force could not be compared to Jianchen's, who had only reached Class 9 as a Radiant Saint Master. As a result, Jianchen had many things he could learn from the envoy. Very soon, Jianchen completely submerged himself in the comprehension of Radiant Saint Force. He was an expert who could fight someone at the primordial realm after all, so he possessed a rich foundation. His Radiant Saint Force remained at Class 9 and never broke through because he never found a path to continue. Now he was able to comprehend the envoy's usage of Radiant Saint Force at such proximity, so it was like seeing a lighthouse within the dark night. He instantly found his path. Suddenly dazzling milky white light flickered around Jianchen. The light shone brighter and brighter, becoming like the sun in the sky. It enveloped Jianchen completely. At the same time, strands of extremely pure Radiant Saint Force and Origin energy gathered in from all directions, forming a swirl of energy that only Radiant Saint Masters could sense above Jianchen's head. Like a whale taking in water, he completely absorbed all the Radiant Saint Force and Origin energy that gathered above him. The Soulcore in Jianchen's head that had been completely condensed from Radiant Saint Force and Origin energy, representing him as a Class 9, Radiant Saint Master, revolved rapidly. It grew at a terrifying rate, undergoing a qualitative transformation. In the end, the pure white Soulcore became scarlet. It hovered in Jianchen's head quietly as it shone with faint red light. It seemed like a scarlet flower. You've actually broken through at a time like this. It looks like your talent is pretty impressive. The envoy glanced at Jianchen and sighed in surprise. But clearly, even when Jianchen broke through, his strength was still on a completely different level compared to the envoy's. As a result, his breakthrough did not raise too much of the envoy's attention. The question was, would the envoy still be able to remain as composed as he was right now when he found out Jianchen that was an expert who could kill primordial realm experts? The 7 colors of the Soulcore are equivalent to the 3 levels of the Origin realm and the 4 levels of godhood. My Soulcore is scarlet right now, Which means I've formally advanced from Class 9 to Class 10 as a Radiant Saint Master, thought Jianchen. He had never thought he would make a breakthrough before he had even arrived at the Radiant Saint Master. Moreover, he had broken through without a cultivation method, finding his direction completely through the envoy's usage of Radiant Saint Force. He could not help but become eager. He had no idea what impressive cultivation method he could obtain from the Radiant Saint Hall, and how his cultivation as a Radiant Saint Force would advance at an astonishing rate. After all, he was different from others. On the surface, he was only a Radiant Saint Master who had just made it to Class 10, but in reality, he was also a fighter with a powerful soul. We're here. This is the Radiant Saint Hall. At this moment, the envoy said to Jianchen. Jianchen looked over with that. He discovered he had arrived amidst a mountain range that was extremely abundant in Radiant Saint Force. Stone huts or dwellings could be seen everywhere as white-robed Radiant Saint Masters moved about all over the place. They flew in the sky, wrapped around by a dense layer of white light. They seemed to possess the slight bearing of an immortal. Jianchen only glanced at the landscape around him casually before suddenly raising his head and looking up ahead. He could see that a colossal divine hall stood amongst the clouds 1,000,000 kilometers away. It shone with dazzling, pure white light that illuminated the surroundings and enveloped the endless mountains. The entire divine hall seemed extremely holy. It gave off a sacred presence, which would make people feel reverence towards it. We're in the exterior mountains of the Radiant Saint Hall. The disciples of weaker strength and talent gather here. You're a one-star genius, so you have the right to directly enter the interior mountains and take a Radiant God King as a teacher. Each Radiant God King is referred to as Protector in our Radiant Saint Hall. In the past decade, Protector Han has been responsible for all the new starred disciples. I'll take you to Protector Han's territory. You can cultivate under his tutelage from today onwards. If you are outstanding, maybe you'll gain the right to enter the sacred hall, the envoy explained to Jianchen. As soon as he mentioned the sacred hall, he could not help but show anticipation. The envoy brought Jianchen to one of the peak of the interior mountain. Before leaving by himself, Jianchen discovered that aside from himself, there were two other people waiting there. He was familiar with the two of them. They were the two other starred geniuses who had entered the Radiant Saint Hall with him. They were the one-star genius Baiyu and the five-star genius Shuofeng. You're a starred genius as well. Can you tell me how many stars you have? Jianchen's arrival immediately attracted Baiyu and Shuofeng's gazes. Baiyu looked at Jianchen as she blinked with her large eyes as she asked him curiously. I barely just made it into the ranks of the one-star geniuses. Jianchen showed off his token of authority and said indifferently, how many colors does your Soulcore have? Shuofeng asked with undisguised arrogance as if he was superior to Jianchen. There were no Class 10 or Class 11 in the Saints' world. Cultivation level was determined by the colors of the Soulcore. I only just condensed the first color. Jianchen ignored Shuofeng's attitude and said indifferently. He was not a fighter anymore. He was just a weak Radiant Saint Master. You've only condensed the first color? Hehehe, then I'm stronger than you. I've already condensed the second color. Senior Shuofeng is the most powerful. He has already reached the peak of the three-colored Soulcore. If no accidents happen, Senior Shuofeng should be our first senior brother, while I will be the second senior sister. As for you, you'll be our little junior brother. Little junior brother, what's your name? Oh right, quickly greet me as your senior sister. Baiyu was especially active and open. She giggled at Jianchen. As for Shuofeng, he could not help but begin looking down on Jianchen after he heard that Jianchen only had a one-colored Soulcore. Chapter 22:17. The celestial sword saint Jianchen looked at Baiyu rather speechlessly. He said, do you really want to be the senior this much? And isn't it too soon for you to decide that you're my senior? Baiyu rolled her eyes as she said rather complacently, it's not me who wants to be your senior. Who can help the fact that I'm stronger than you? That's why I can only just accept you as my little junior brother, Junior. Why don't you call me your senior sooner? If you make me your senior happy, I'll protect you in the future. Once someone bullies you, feel free to come to find your senior sister. Baiyu purposefully acted gallantly at the end. However, when she tried to give off a bearing like that, Jianchen saw nothing close to it. Jianchen burst into laughter. Did he still need the protection of a radiant saint master, who was only at returnance? Of course. If even senior sister can't stop the powerful opponent, there's still first senior brother. Isn't that right, senior Zhuofeng? Junior sister is right. If there are any ignorant bastards who offends junior sister in the future, feel free to come to find me. I'll stand forward for you. Zhuofeng revealed a radiant smile on his handsome face as he looked at Baiyu amiably. However, Zhuofeng did not even glance at Jianchen as if he did not take him seriously at all. Zhuofeng, Baiyu, Changyang, come to the top of the mountain immediately. At this moment, a heavy voice boomed out from the sky. Jianchen, Baiyu, and Zhuofeng all looked at the top of the mountain when they heard that. They all understood that the owner of the voice was extremely likely to be their teacher. Baiyu and Zhuofeng immediately became prudent. A radiant god king could still strike a certain amount of awe in them. Baiyu and Zhuofeng immediately dared not tarry. They both condensed radiant saint force and flew towards the top of the mountain peak, as soon as they heard the voice. However, as soon as they tried to condense radiant saint force, they discovered in surprise that an invisible force bound their bodies. They were unable to fly at all. However, the two of them soon realized that this was probably a test from their future teacher. Immediately, they made up their minds and ran towards the top of the mountain. Jianchen remained completely calm. He stared at the mountaintop for a while before chasing behind Baiyu and Zhuofeng with a single movement. He followed behind them steadily, hurrying towards the top of the mountain. At the same time, in the vast outer space beyond the desolate plain, a streak of azure light shot through deep space with unbelievable speed. Unsurprisingly, the streak of light headed straight for the huge piece of land floating in space. In the end, the azure streak of light did not enter the boundary of the desolate plain. It stopped outside the desolate plain in the sea of stars and turned into a man in azure clothes. The man was the infamous heavenly king of azure brilliance of the saints' world, the Azure Peng King. He's actually on the desolate plain. The Azure Peng King hovered in outer space with his presence concealed. He stared at the desolate plain and frowned. I can't wait any longer. The solitary sword ancestor is about to come. I have to get the Anata Tower from Jianchen before the solitary sword ancestor no matter what, even if I have to pay a certain price, thought the Azure Peng King. He made up his mind and carefully concealed his presence, approaching the desolate plain silently with an extremely low profile. Piss off. However, a voice boomed out in outer space at this moment. In the next moment, extremely powerful laws of the sword condensed in outer space, and in a single instance, it formed a colossal strand of sword chi in the sea of stars. The sword chi was over 100,000 kilometers long. It was truly colossal. From afar, it hung in the sky like a resplendent galaxy, shining with dazzling and blinding light, illuminating outer space before directly chopping towards the Azure Peng King. Under the slash of the sword chi, the sky full of starlight twisted as if countless stars had fallen out from space. The terrifying sword chi split space into two. It was horrifying. The Azure Peng King's expression changed. He did not receive the strike forcefully. Instead, he flickered with azure light and unleashed his great speed, turning into a blur that retreated to 10 million kilometers away to avoid the attack. Celestial Sword Saint, I don't wish to have conflict with you. The murderer of my disciple is on the desolate plain right now. I only want to capture the murderer of my beloved disciple. I hope you don't interfere. The Azure Peng King said coldly with a sunken face. I don't care about your reason. If you want to step on the desolate plain, feel free to try it. The Celestial Sword Saint's voice rang out from the sea of stars. It was cold and filled with killing intent. The Azure Peng King hovered in the distant space and stared at the desolate plain uneasily. However, he still did not take that step in the end. Before long, the space beside the Azure Peng King suddenly twisted. A huge crack suddenly appeared, and the solitary sword ancestor with a sword on his back charged out from the crack, while seated on his meteor. The huge meteor stopped near the Azure Peng King. The solitary sword ancestor stared at the desolate plain before standing up and clasping his fist in the direction of the desolate plain. Celestial Sword Saint, long time no see. How have you been? Solitary Sword, You've actually come as well. You can come over, but that bluebird brain is forbidden from setting foot on the desolate plain, said the celestial sword saint. He spoke brutally, showing no respect to the Azure Peng King. Having been called a bluebird brain despite being the heavenly king of azure brilliance, the Azure Peng King's face immediately paled in anger, and sank in a terrifying manner. The solitary sword ancestor clasped his fist at the celestial sword saint again. After exchanging pleasantries, he took a step away from his meteor, and entered the desolate plain. But at this moment the solitary sword ancestor's expression changed. Suddenly he looked behind him. A white-robed, middle-aged man strode over through the vast sea of stars. He crossed an extremely great distance with each step, directly making his way towards the solitary sword ancestor. In just a few seconds, the middle-aged man arrived a few kilometers away from the solitary sword ancestor. You seem to have come for me specially? Are you looking for me for something particular? The solitary sword ancestor stopped, and looked back at the white-robed man. He frowned slightly. The Azure Peng King also noticed the middle-aged man, but he only glanced at him before losing interest because the middle-aged man was just too weak. He did not raise the Azure Peng King's attention at all. I heard you issued a bounty for Jianchen everywhere? The middle-aged man looked at the solitary sword ancestor calmly, and said with great composure, The only successor of my solitary sword lineage was killed by Jianchen, growled the solitary sword ancestor. There are 2 reasons why I'm looking for you. The first is that I hope you can give up on the bounty and your hunt for Jianchen, said the middle-aged man. He remained calm the entire time. The Azure Peng King became angered when he heard that. However, he did not act up on the spot. He could tell that the middle-aged man was not as simple as he seemed, so he turned towards the solitary sword ancestor and said to him secretly, Who is this person? He's a mere 9th heavenly layer infinite prime. Yet he dares to talk to you like that? Do not underestimate him. He's not someone that should be provoked. What you see right now is only a clone of his, the solitary sword ancestor replied sternly. Chapter 22:18. Second senior brother. The Azure Peng King's face immediately sank from the solitary sword ancestor's cautious warning. The solitary sword ancestor had revealed one fact to him without any doubt. The middle-aged man, who was only a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, possessed an extremely powerful original body. Even a peak expert as powerful as the solitary sword ancestor had to act cautiously. Originally, the middle-aged man had nothing to do with him, the Azure Peng King, but he just happened to want to protect Jianchen, who the Azure Peng King wanted to kill. It immediately made the Azure Peng King's expression become rather ugly. The solitary sword ancestor fell silent when he heard the middle-aged man's words. He looked at the white-robed, determined man indifferently and only said after quite a while, You know just how difficult it is to find a suitable successor for my solitary sword ancestor. Gongzheng was the only person I managed to find in the vast saints world after so much difficulty, but in the end, he was slain by Jianchen in the Neptunian Divine Palace before he could fully mature and spread his wings. If you want to protect Jianchen, how will I be able to explain this to the past generations of my solitary sword lineage? The white-robed man smiled indifferently. Finding a suitable successor might be an extremely arduous matter to you, but it's nothing for me. The solitary sword ancestor's eyes narrowed when he heard that. Immediately, he stared at the middle-aged man with brimming interest and asked eagerly, Are you willing to find suitable successors for me? The middle-aged man nodded. It's not a matter of finding suitable successors. I've already found suitable successors. There are 3 juniors with great talent who are extremely suitable to become successors of your solitary sword lineage. 3? Really? The solitary sword ancestor's face lit up, and his eyes shone. You know whether I'm telling the truth or not. Solitary sword. I'll use these 3 successors to exchange for your bounty on Jianchen. Moreover, you cannot target Jianchen in the future anymore. Do you agree? The middle-aged man said indifferently. All right, I agree. If the 3 of them become successors to my solitary sword lineage, not only will I stop targeting Jianchen, but I'll even owe you a huge favor, the solitary sword ancestor said loudly. Jubilation filled his voice. It was extremely difficult for his solitary sword lineage to find successors. Even during its most glorious time, there were no more than 10 successors. In his generation, there had only been a single successor, Gongzheng. As a result, the solitary sword ancestor was naturally overjoyed when he suddenly heard news of 3 successors. You said there are 2 reasons why you're looking for me. What's the second reason? The solitary sword ancestor asked. I want you to take action personally, said the middle-aged man. You want me to take action? The solitary sword ancestor was surprised. The middle-aged man sank into his thoughts for a while before telling the solitary sword ancestor secretly, My original body is trapped. I need you to take action and destroy a seal. The solitary sword ancestor immediately became stern. He glanced at the middle-aged man with his eyes that had seen many aspects of life, and thought for a very long time before nodding slowly. Seeing the solitary sword ancestor agree, the middle-aged man's face did not change at all. He remained calm and composed the entire time. A shard of jade directly shot into the solitary sword ancestor's hand, and the middle-aged man said, Here is the location of your 3 successors. Afterwards, the middle-aged man no longer remained there. He took a step and left, entering the desolate plain with composure. He did not even glance at the Azure Peng King as if he was nothing. Solitary sword, who is he? The Azure Peng King arrived before the solitary sword ancestor in a flash, and asked with a sunken face, after the middle-aged man had left. The solitary sword ancestor shook his head gently. He did not seem to be willing to talk about the middle-aged man's identity. However, he did open his mouth, tempted to warn the Azure Peng King to give up on his hunt for Jianchun, but as soon as he was going to say it, he remembered the Azure Peng King's nature. He knew that even if he warned the Azure Peng King, it would not change his mind, so he said nothing in the end. He took the shard of jade with the location of the 3 successors, and left eagerly in excitement and anticipation. Seeing the solitary sword ancestor leave, the Azure Peng King became uneasy. He looked at the huge desolate plain that hovered in space, and the light in his eyes flickered with uncertainty. In the end, he was still unwilling to just watch Jianchun hide on the desolate plain safely. He called out, Celestial Sword Saint, the grievances of the past are in the past. It has already been so many years, so why must you cling on to them? If you give me just 2 hours on the desolate plain, I will definitely give you a great remuneration. Ha ha ha. In terms of vengefulness, how many people can match up to you, Azure Bird Brain, in the entire Saints world? It's still the same as before. If you want to step onto the desolate plain, feel free to try it. The Celestial Sword Saint replied with a provocation and threat. He did not appear, but his voice boomed through outer space like a great bell. The Azure Peng King's face paled in anger. He glanced in the direction of the desolate plain icily, and snorted coldly before turning around and leaving. However, he did not go far away. Instead, he sat down on a meteor in the distant space, observing Jianchun from far away. Jianchun, I'd like to see how long you can remain on the desolate plain. The Azure Peng King thought as he looked at the fingernail-sized land in the distance. Jianchun, Baiyu, and Zhuofeng currently unleashed their full might in the Radiant Saint Hall, running towards the top of the mountain crazily. They moved extremely quickly, just like 3 streaks of white light that vanished through the forest in a flash. Out of the 3 of them, Zhuofeng was the strongest, possessing a 3-colored Soulcore. His entire body bathed in milky white Radiant Saint force as he ran at the front. Following him was Baiyu with her 2-colored Soulcore, while Jianchun was last. In reality, Jianchun could completely break free from the restraints of the mysterious power with his current cultivation, and reach the top of the mountain in a single step. However, his status now was only a Radiant Saint Master who had just condensed a 1-colored Soulcore, so the strength he could display was completely restricted to that. However, even with that being the case, the strength he displayed could not be compared to the Radiant Saint force from a 1-colored Soulcore. As they sprinted, he gradually inched closer to Baiyu. And this was Jianchun holding back, unwilling to stand out. Otherwise, he could easily surpass Baiyu and Zhuofeng. In the end, Zhuofeng reached the mountain top first. Jianchun, on the other hand, sped up slightly at the final juncture, allowing him to be 1 step faster than Baiyu to claim second. It also made Bai, who was originally second, end up last as third place. Little junior brother, I couldn't tell that you were actually even faster than senior sister. Bai looked at Jianchen as she breathed rather heavily. Very good. Since everyone is here, I formally announce that Zhou Feng, Chang Yang, and Bai will be the students of Han Xian. In the future, I'll be responsible for guiding you on the path of cultivation as a radiant saint master. A white-robed middle-aged man stood before the three of them. He seemed graceful and refined, slightly like a scholar, but his eyes shone brightly as he spoke to the three of them. From today onwards, Zhou Feng will be the first senior brother. Chang Yang, you will be the second senior brother, while Bai will be the little junior sister, Han Xian said firmly, leaving no room for discussion. Huh. How did I become the smallest? No. Master, this isn't fair. This doesn't make sense. I should be the second senior, so why did I end up as the smallest? Bai refused to accept this. Sir, I have a two-colored Soulcore, while Junior Chang Yang has only condensed his one-colored Soulcore. I have no objections about Senior Shuafeng being the first senior, but why must Junior Chang Yang, who's weaker than me, have more seniority? That's clearly unfair. Han Xian looked at Bai and said, Who told you seniority is determined by cultivation? Is that not it? Bai pointed and said matter-of-factly. She felt wronged. Here, whoever makes it to the mountaintop earlier will have greater seniority. Zhou Feng made it first, so he is the first senior. Chang Yang followed him, so Chang Yang is the second senior. You were last, so you're naturally the youngest in terms of seniority, Han Xian said firmly. Then he waved his hand. Enough. The matter has been settled, so don't talk about it anymore. Go find a place to set up a dwelling yourself as a place for cultivation. Come see me tomorrow morning. Remember, the dwelling must lie within my territory. With that, Han Xian directly left without even glancing at Bai's sulking expression. Sir, how can you do this? It's unfair. Bai sulked as Han Xian walked away. She was close to crying. Chapter 22:19. Laws of the Hallowed. No. Chang Yang, I want to change it back. I'm your senior sister. You're my little junior brother. Bai turned towards Jianchen. She glared at him and purposefully put up a stern demeanor, like she was threatening him. Jianchen could not help but smile. That's not something the two of us can decide. If junior sister is unwilling to accept it, junior can only go find teacher. With that, Jianchen left and made his way off the mountain. Who's your little junior sister? Chang Yang, you're not allowed to call me that in the future. Bai called out in annoyance. As if she had just suffered an injustice, she was unhappy. Afterwards, Jianchen found a quiet area halfway up the mountain and carved out a cave, which would be his dwelling for cultivation in the future. The place he chose was inconspicuous. Not only was it in a remote region, but it was also among the bushes, so basically half of the entrance was obscured. It seemed extremely well hidden. As a dwelling, it naturally needed protective formations. However, it was inappropriate for Jianchen to cast down overly powerful formations here, so he found some weaker formation discs and set them up at the entrance as protective formations. In just 6 hours, Jianchen had completely set up his simple dwelling. Afterwards, he sat down in the center and began to think over his plans for the future. I can't stay in the Radiant Saint Hall for too long. The main reason why I've come here is for the cultivation method of Hallowed Saint Masters. Once I get the cultivation method, I'll leave immediately. Jianchen had begun to make up his mind secretly. As for the threat from the Azure Peng King, he had already thought of a plan. Since the Azure Peng King cannot set foot on the Desolate Plain, I have no need to worry about him at all here. If I leave the Desolate Plain in the future, I can go directly to the Heavenly Palace of Bishing on the Prosper Plain, and return the Anata Tower before asking the experts of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing to suppress the Azure Peng King. The only issue is the solitary sword ancestor. If he comes to the Desolate Plain, I can only attempt the Path of Swords, thought Jianchen. Although he had already altered his appearance now, his disguise was basically useless before an expert like the solitary sword ancestor. The celestial sword saint set up the Path of Swords on the Desolate Plain, and it's rumored that reaching the end will give you the right to become the Celestial Sword Saint's disciple. I don't know what level of cultivation the Celestial Sword Saint has reached, but it's quite obvious from the rumors that he's an extremely terrifying existence on the desolate plane. He shouldn't be any weaker than the Solitary Sword Saint, so if push comes to shove, I'll go attempt it. However, attempting the Path of Swords also carries a tremendous amount of risk. I shouldn't attempt it unless I have no other choice because I don't have complete confidence that I can hide the sword spirits from an existence like the Solitary Sword Saint with my current level of cultivation. As he grew stronger, Jianchen's ability to hide the sword spirits became better and better. After all, he was someone who had reached the major achievement of the chaotic body. Unless he encountered a peak expert who was far more powerful than him, it would be impossible for his greatest secrets to be discovered in a single glance. Before long, Jianchen dismissed all of these thoughts. He spent the remaining time to consolidate his Soulcore that had just broken through. Cultivation was timeless, so he completely lost track of time. As a result, when Jianchen roused from cultivation, it was already noon on the next day. The time that Han Xian told them to meet at had passed long ago. Looking at the sky, Jianchen frowned. He left the cave and displayed the strength that belonged to a one-colored Soulcore Radiant Saint Master, and flew towards the top of the mountain. Very soon, Jianchen reached the top of the mountain. He discovered that Zhuofeng and Bai Yu were seated on the ground. They were surrounded by milky white Radiant Saint force, clearly already cultivating. Han Xian stood with his arms behind his back. He had his back towards the two of them as he blankly stared at the Radiant Saint Hall that stood within the clouds. Eagerness filled the depths of his eyes. "Changyang, why are you late on the first day?" Han Xian asked with his back towards Jianchen. He spoke very indifferently. "Sir, I only broke through to one-colored Soulcore yesterday, so when I was consolidating my cultivation in my dwelling, I forgot about time. I only roused just then." Jianchen clasped his fist and said with composure, "All right," Han Xian replied gently. He did not look back at Jianchen, nor did he continue to dwell on the matter. Instead, he said, "Do you know what Radiant Saint Force is?" Jianchen was slightly surprised by this question. He thought that Han Xian was going to give him a full lecture on being late, but he had never thought it would end up like this. After a moment of thought, Jianchen said, "Radiant Saint Force, from a simple sense, is an energy that only Radiant Saint Masters can see. This energy does not have outstanding offensive powers, but it has great healing powers. It can even revive people from the dead, making it extremely wondrous. From a more complicated aspect, Radiant Saint Force is one of the 3,000 ways that creates and supports the operation of this world." You are very correct. Radiant Saint Force is actually also one of the 3,000 laws. Do you know what the difference between Hallowed Saint Masters and Radiant Saint Master are? Han Xian continued to ask. This time, Jianchen hesitated for a while before replying. "I don't know much about Hallowed Saint Masters, nor do I understand much about them. All I know is that Hallowed Saint Masters have grasped another law and are able to transform Radiant Saint Force, making it extremely powerful and offensive despite being rather below average originally. Its strength is no weaker than the laws known to possess the most offensive powers." Jianchen had seldom come in contact with Hallowed Saint Master. There was only Xianming, so his knowledge about Hallowed Saint Master was naturally extremely limited. Han Xian finally returned to his senses. He looked at Jianchen with shining eyes. "Changyang, everything else was correct. There's just one thing you got wrong. The law grasped by Hallowed Saint Masters is not equal to the laws known to possess the greatest offensive powers. It is even stronger. Do you know why?" Before Jianchen could reply, Han Xian continued, "That's because the laws grasped by Hallowed Saint Masters is not just the power of laws, but the power of our spirits as well. This type of law is known as the laws of the hallowed by us." "The power of spirits," Jianchen murmured. He found the term spirit both familiar and unfamiliar, because it was the original form of the soul. Since many years ago, only souls existed in the world he interacted with. Very people still used the term spirit. Tian, I think I explained this before. The soul/spirit kind of undergoes a metamorphosis after reaching sainthood, Saint Ruler in particular. And it basically becomes unbound from the soul. So even if the body is destroyed, the person is still alive as long as their souls are intact. In Chinese, they switch terms, so there's an individual term for soul before sainthood, and then an individual term for soul after sainthood. This frequently happens with many novels. However, the past translator never ended up planning for this, so I just use spirit/soul here to show the difference. Watch closely. This is the laws of the Hallowed. Han Xian raised his hand slowly, and a blinding ball of white light gradually condensed in his hand. That was the laws of the Hallowed. Jianchen stared at the laws of the Hallowed in Han Xian's hand closely. The first time he had seen the laws of the Hallowed was from Xian Ming, so this was the second time seeing it. However, he gained a completely different feeling from seeing the laws of the Hallowed here compared to when he saw it from Xian Ming. This was because at that time, Xian Ming had used the laws of the Hallowed to attack, completely displaying the swift and brutal aspect of the laws. It was extremely fast as well, so Jianchen did not have much time to comprehend its secrets. Yet now, the laws of the Hallowed in Han Xian's hands seemed much gentler to Jianchen. Moreover, Han Xian condensed the laws at an extremely gradual rate, not only allowing Jianchen to sense the mysteries in the laws with greater clarity, but also giving him ample time to closely comprehend it. Jianchen could not help but close his eyes. At that moment, he felt like his soul had flown out and fused with the laws of the Hallowed in Han Xian's hand. Under this state, he could clearly sense all the mysteries of the laws of the Hallowed, sensing all the changes that the laws went through in Han Xian's hands. At that moment, Jianchen even felt like he had become the laws of the Hallowed in Han Xian's hand, where they were inseparable. Chapter 22:20. Mo Tianyun. Unknowingly, Jianchen had already sat down. Milky white radiant saint force had enveloped him as well, gathering the radiant saint force from the surroundings unintentionally. As a result, he seemed exactly the same as Bai Yu and Zhuofeng right now, all of them being in a state of cultivation. However, unlike Bai Yu and Zhuofeng, Jianchen's comprehension of the laws of the Hallowed increased rapidly, while other two still struggled to grasp the secrets of the laws. As his comprehension constantly deepened, Jianchen's knowledge and understanding of the laws of the Hallowed became greater and greater. He had almost reached a rudimentary level with the laws. Time passed in a hurry. In the blink of an eye, it was already the evening of that day. Only when the sun set and dyed the sky red did they rouse. Sir, the laws of the Hallowed are far too profound and mysterious. Even after a day of comprehending the laws of the Hallowed you invoked, I still haven't made any progress. Bai Yu pouted and said in low spirits. Han Xian smiled. I never expected the three of you to grasp the laws of the Hallowed immediately. Let alone you. But even 9-star geniuses won't be able to grasp the laws of the Hallowed from a single glance at the same level of cultivation as you. My true intention was for you to witness the gateway to becoming a Hallowed Saint Master, so that I can pave a path for you beforehand. That way, it'll become slightly easier when you become a Hallowed Saint Master in the future. Sir, is it very difficult to comprehend the laws of the Hallowed and become a Hallowed Saint Master? Jianchen asked. Han Xian nodded. It is quite difficult for a Radiant Saint Master to comprehend the laws of the Hallowed and become a Hallowed Saint Master. It's no less difficult than a fighter going from the origin realm to godhood, or even more difficult. In our Radiant Saint Hall, basically all the Radiant Saint Masters with 3-colored Soulcores spend a very long time before becoming a Hallowed Saint Master. There are even other Radiant Saint Masters who only manage to truly comprehend the laws of the Hallowed after condensing a 4-colored Soulcore. Of course, everything depends on personal talent. Some unprecedented prodigies can comprehend the laws of the Hallowed before condensing a 3-colored Soulcore. But if your talent is far too lacking, even if you have a 7-colored Soulcore and become a Radiant God King, you might not be fated to become a Hallowed Saint Master. In the end, Han Xian looked at Zhuofeng and said, Zhuofeng, you're a 5-star genius, and you've already reached the 3-colored Soulcore. May I ask if you've benefited? Han Xian clearly held high hopes for Zhuofeng. Zhuofeng did not reply immediately. He thought about it for a while before replying. Sir, I've managed to benefit slightly, but I still need some time before I truly comprehend the laws of the Hallowed. Han Xian nodded in satisfaction. I hope you can become a Hallowed Saint Master while you have a 3-colored soul core. I will work hard and not disappoint you, sir, Shuofeng said with great confidence. These are my notes on comprehension that I've tidied through. Although it's not exactly precious, it'll bring some assistance to you. It also comes with a cultivation method that allows you to cultivate to the 4-colored soul core. The 3 of you should take it and comprehend it. Of course, this cultivation method is rather standard. It's only suitable for Radiant Saint Masters who have not condensed a 4-colored soul core, so it just happens to be enough for you. Han Xian then took out a few brand new books and passed it to Jianchun, Baiyu and Zhuofeng. Sir, may I ask how cultivation methods of higher grades can be obtained? Jianchun asked. A cultivation method that could only reach the 4-colored soul core was nowhere near enough for him. Better cultivation methods can only be obtained from the Tower of Radiance in the Sacred Hall. However, you still don't have the right to enter the Tower of Radiance right now. Enough, that will be all for today. You are dismissed. Han Xian waved his hand, turned around and left. Junior brother, you sure are bold late on the first day. Quick, tell senior sister how teacher punished you. As soon as Han Xian left, Baiyu looked at Jianchun with her large eyes and asked curiously, what rudeness? I'm your second senior. You're the little junior sister, Jianchun said in a joking yet displeased manner. Your cultivation is weaker than mine, so of course you can only be my little junior brother. Unless your cultivation exceeds mine, it'll be impossible for me to accept you as my second senior. Baiyu snorted lightly and said in a purposefully arrogant manner. Zhuofeng could not help but frown when he saw Baiyu like that. He said, Junior sister, senior has already gained some understanding of the laws of the Hallowed. Come to the moon-viewing cliff at night. We can discuss our experiences with comprehending the laws of the Hallowed. Baiyu completely understood. Zhuofeng wanted to pass on what he had comprehended to her, so her eyes immediately lit up. She agreed excitedly. All right. I won't be leaving until you show up at the moon-viewing cliff tonight. Little junior brother, you have to come along and don't be late. Junior Changyang only has a 1-colored soul core right now, so there's still some time before he comes in contact with the laws of the Hallowed. He probably won't benefit if he comes, and it'll waste his time for cultivation instead. Junior Changyang, cultivate properly first. Once you condense a 2-colored soul core, I'll pass on my experience to you, Zhuofeng said immediately. Clearly, he did not want Jianchun to come. Thank you for your kind intentions, senior, but I just happen to desire to cultivate properly in a quiet environment. It would not be suitable for me to spend my time on other matters. Jianchun smiled indifferently and left. Before long, Jianchun returned to his extremely simple dwelling that had an entrance covered by bushes. He directly sat down and began to comprehend the laws of the Hallowed again. For hours later, Jianchun's eyes snapped open. He raised his hand slowly, and immediately, a white power with a brutal presence condensed in his hand. Unsurprisingly, this power was the laws of the Hallowed. Han Xian's conjuring of the laws of the Hallowed was like a lighthouse in the dark to Jianchun. It pointed him in the direction that he could advance in, allowing him to gain a basic view of a rudimentary grasp over the laws of the Hallowed. Now that he tried comprehending the laws again quietly, he basically grasped them completely before too long, becoming a Hallowed Saint Master. Han Xian said that most Radiant Saint Masters only become Hallowed Saint Master when they have 3-colored or 4-colored soul cores. Yet I've become one with just a 1-colored soul core. Jianchun murmured as he looked at the laws of the Hallowed that had gathered in his hand. It has been over 1,000,000 years since someone has become a Hallowed Saint Master with a 1-colored soul core. Impressive, Jianchun. Your talent is indeed extremely outstanding. It fills me with amazement. Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind Jianchun. The sudden voice immediately caused Jianchun's face to change dramatically. He shot up from the group instinctively and turned around, looking behind him in shock. Even though he was cultivating, he still remained somewhat vigilant of the world around him. Yet he failed to sense that someone had appeared in his dwelling silently while he was cultivating. A white-robed middle-aged man with a resolute face stood behind Jianchun silently. He was like air, possessing no presence, and Jianchen's soul and senses could not detect him. He could only see him with his eyes. However, when he saw the middle-aged man clearly, Jianchen became completely stunned. Disbelief filled his face. "Who are you?" Jianchen asked in surprise as he was in emotional turmoil. The middle-aged man smiled. "I think you already know who I am." "Senior Tianyun, is it really you?" Jianchen called out. He felt rather dazed and felt like he was dreaming because the middle-aged man was the same person who had left behind a great legend that lasted 1,000,000 years on the Tianyuan continent, Tianyun. Whether it was Shui Yunlan or Shaoling, they all wanted to find Tianyun as soon as possible. However, the saint's world was so vast, so finding a single person was anything but easy. It was even more difficult than finding a needle in a haystack. However, he had never thought that Tianyun would appear here, strangely enough, much less in his dwelling. How did Tianyun find him? Moreover, Jianchen did not use his original appearance. He currently had a completely different face. How did Tianyun manage to recognize him with a single glance? Furthermore, this place was within the Radiant Saint Hall's territory. Was Tianyun a part of the Radiant Saint Hall since he suddenly appeared here? At that moment, besides surprise and joy, Jianchen was filled with queries now that he had suddenly found the greatest human expert of the past, Tianyun. Chapter 22-21. Suspicions about identity. Tianyun looked at Jianchen in admiration and sighed emotionally. "When my clone saw you near the Yinyang Saint Rock, you were nowhere close to godhood. I never thought that in just a few short centuries, you would become someone renowned in the saints' world. Apart from those hermits who always remain in seclusion, there's basically no one who doesn't know your name in the saints' world now." Tianyun smiled mysteriously towards the end. Jianchen smiled awkwardly. Naturally, he knew that Tianyun was referring to the bounties from the Azure Peng King and the solitary sword ancestor. Indeed, a mere god king wanted by two peak experts of the saints' world, the Azure Peng King and the solitary sword ancestor, would lead to quite the disturbance. It would even raise the close attention of many large organizations. "Senior Tianyun, how did you find me? Are you a part of the Radiant Saint Hall?" Jianchen stated his suspicions. "I'm not a part of the Radiant Saint Hall, but finding you is nothing difficult." Tianyun smiled mysteriously. He looked at Jianchen amiably and said, "Do you still remember that tower-shaped saint artifact you got from the Radiant Saint Union on the Tianyuan continent?" "Of course I do," said Jianchen. The Radiant Saint artifact had been of great use to him back in the lower world. It was also the reason why he could become a Class 9, Radiant Saint Master. However, the quality of the Radiant Saint Tower was limited. As his strength increased, the Radiant Saint artifact gradually became useless, so he never really used it after coming to the Saint's world. The reason why I can find you in the vast Saint's world is because of that Radiant Saint artifact. In the past, a clone of mine entered the Radiant Saint artifact in the lower world and destroyed the seal within the Radiant Saint artifact while I was there, freeing up the Radiant Saint Force origin energy trapped there. When I destroyed the seal, I also left behind an extremely obscure imprint, so I could find you in the Saint's world as long as you still possessed the Radiant Saint artifact," said Tianyun. "Then, in other words, Senior already knew as soon as I came to the Saint's world?" Jianchen said. At the same time, he finally understood that the seal within the Radiant Saint artifact, that even the artifact spirit could do nothing about, was destroyed by Tianyun. This made him feel some gratitude towards Tianyun. After all, if it were not for the destruction of the seal, he would have never been able to become a Class 9, Radiant Saint Master. Tianyun shook his head. "I don't know exactly when you came to the Saint's world because the imprint I left in the Radiant Saint artifact can only be sensed through a corresponding secret technique." Jianchen felt extremely elated when the past greatest human expert of the Tianyuan continent had suddenly appeared. Afterwards, Jianchen placed down a stone table outside the dwelling and sat there with Tianyun. Under the dark, starry skies, they began a long conversation. "Senior Tianyun, I have something I'd like to inquire about." The winged tiger god that appeared on the Tianyun continent during the ancient times should be the same person as Senior Mo Tianyun, right? Or maybe he's a clone of Senior Mo Tianyun? Jianchen asked. Jianchen had gradually come up with this suspicion through his understanding of the past matters back on the Tianyun continent. However, he was just not certain. How did you reach that conclusion? Mo Tianyun asked calmly. Jianchen focused his mind and tidied through his thoughts before saying slowly, first, of the 4 champions in the past, there have been records of growth for the war god Ergens of the 100 races and the sea goddess of the sea race. Only you and the winged tiger god basically appeared out of nowhere. And you were already far more powerful than Saint Emperors. There weren't any records of your growth in the ancient records at all. Secondly, the world where the Tianyun continent resides in had actually been sealed up over 3 million years ago, preventing anyone from reaching the origin realm. The reason why the war god could reach the origin realm was because of his powerful bloodline, while the sea goddess could reach the origin realm because she's the same as Xiaoling, a natural spirit. And natural spirits are all at the origin realm as soon as they come into existence, unbound by the world. So whether it's Ergens or the sea goddess, there are all reasons why they can reach the origin realm. Only Senior Mo Tianyun and the winged tiger god had no reason at all. This makes the two of you extremely similar. Thirdly, when I looked through the records, I discovered that after the winged tiger god had vanished from the Tianyun continent with the dragon and phoenix clans, Senior Mo Tianyun vanished as well. Mo Tianyun smiled mysteriously. You determined that I was the winged tiger god just from that? Have you ever considered that once the winged tiger god left with the dragon and phoenix clans, I went to where the Inyang Saint Rock was and watched over it? But you only sent a clone to watch over the rock, and the clone could have been the winged tiger god as well. Jianchen stared at Mo Tianyun with brimming interest and continued. Of course, this isn't enough to explain that Senior is the same person as the winged tiger god. The real reason why I was able to reach this conclusion was because of Xiaoling. Xiaoling. Mo Tianyun's eyes narrowed when he heard Xiaoling's name, and a sliver of undetectable killing intent flickered through his eyes. Naturally, the killing intent was not directed toward Xiaoling, but the Heavenless demon Exalt. In the past when I was in Mercenary City, Xiaoling had once sensed Senior's presence from me, but Senior had already vanished from the Tianyun continent for 1,000,000 years. How would it have been possible for me to come in contact with Senior? At that time, even I did not know why Xiaoling sensed Senior's presence from me. But afterwards, as I grew stronger and stronger and understood more and more things, I finally realized that the presence Xiaoling sensed from me was the presence from the young winged tiger god. At that time, the white tiger had only been born recently, so it was naturally unable to conceal its presence. I had spent so much time with the winged tiger god as well, so I naturally carried its presence. When Xiaoling said she sensed her master's presence back then, it was more like sensing the presence of the winged tiger god. This presence belonged to winged tiger gods, but to different people at the same time, which was why Xiaoling said the presence was extremely faint. Afterwards, as the white tiger grew up, he learnt to conceal his presence, and his presence changed slightly, which was why Xiaoling failed to sense anything from the white tiger anymore. And there's one more point. The 18 pieces of beast fur that have been spread across the world should have come from the winged tiger god. Yet when they were united, Senior's legacy appeared. The way of slaughter. Senior comprehended the way of slaughter, while the legacy that the white tiger received in the beast god hall was also the way of slaughter. Jianchen did not continue. Instead, he looked at Mo Tianyun quietly. Chapter 22-22. Origins of the Tower of Radiance. Mo Tianyun was in no hurry to speak after listening to Jianchen's analysis. His expression did not change either. He continued to look at Jianchen leisurely, but the admiration in his eyes became heavier. You're right. The winged tiger god from the ancient times was indeed me. Mo Tianyun said steadily. He did not try to hide this. Senior, just who are you? Jianchen looked at Mo Tianyun deeply. Mo Tianyun smiled. It doesn't matter who you think I am. What's important is that you understand I have no ill intentions towards you. Of course, if you want to know about my origins, you are welcome to ask the sword spirits. They've probably guessed it already. Tianyun, do you really come from the immortals' world? At this moment, the sword spirits appeared. A wisp of mist gradually condensed into two figures. They did not give off any presence or even sword chi. Clearly, the sword spirits knew that they were in the boundary of the Radiant Saint Hall, so they hid to their greatest ability. Tianyun stared at the sword spirits and nodded. He did not talk. Tianyun, why are you in the saint's world if you're from the immortals' world? And what's the situation with the immortals' world? Is the sword sect of Violent Heavens well? The sword spirits asked. They became nervous when the sword sect of Violet Heavens was mentioned. Tianyun seemed to think back to the past from that, and a sliver of gloominess flashed through his eyes, along with deep hatred. In the end, Tianyun sighed gently. He answered selectively. I've already left the immortals' world over 1,000,000 years ago. I only know that the sword sect of Violet Heavens suffered heavy losses from that battle over 3,000,000 years ago, and was gradually declining. I do not know about its current situation. Has the sword sect of Violent Heavens declined? Ziying asked in low spirits. The sword sect of Violet Heavens lost far too many experts during that battle, so declining is expected. As long as the traditions and legacies of our sect remain, there will be a day where we become powerful once more, said Qing Sua. At this moment, she could not help but think about the warning from the Samsaric immortal Exalt, where he said Jianchen should not return to the immortals' world until he was powerful enough. For some reason, Qing Sua had suddenly felt an ill foreboding when she heard the Samsaric immortal Exalt's words. Tianyun looked at Jianchen and said, Jianchen, since you're both a fighter and a hallowed saint master, you must be a wielder of martial soul force. However, you must bear in mind that while being in the saint's world, you need to hide the existence of the sword spirits, but in the Radiant Saint Hall, you need to hide your identity as a wielder of martial soul force. You can't expose the fact that you can use martial soul force to the Radiant Saint Hall. Thank you for your concern, Senior. I already knew that the martial soul lineage has grievances with the Radiant Saint Hall. I definitely won't expose my martial soul force in the Radiant Saint Hall, Jianchen said before pausing. Then he looked at Tianyun eagerly and asked, Senior Tianyun, do you know anything about martial soul force? There are just far too few members of the martial soul lineage in the saint's world, so there aren't a lot of rumors regarding martial soul force. I haven't come in contact with any people from the martial soul lineage either, so I don't understand this power very well, replied Tianyun. Then he looked at the Radiant Saint Hall that stood among the clouds with all of its holiness and said, the Tower of Radiance within the Radiant Saint Hall has records of all cultivation methods and various battle skills for Radiant Saint Masters. It's an extremely rich collection, far more than what the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall knows. As a matter of fact, even the cultivation methods of the leader and vice leaders come from the Tower of Radiance. As a result, if you want to learn about martial soul force, you can only go to the Tower of Radiance. Are there really that many records in the Tower of Radiance? Jianchen asked in surprise. Tianyun did not answer his question. Instead, he looked at Ziying and Qing Sua. The Tower of Radiance is not simple. You two sword spirits should have heard about its origins to some degree. We do know a little. Ziying nodded. It's said that the Tower of Radiance, us twin swords, and the Anata Grand Prime's Anata Tower are god artifacts of the same level. The Tower of Radiance has existed for an extremely long period of time. What? The Tower of Radiance is actually so powerful? Jianchen's heart shuddered when he heard that. He asked, since the Tower of Radiance is such a powerful god artifact, wouldn't there be no organizations that would be bold enough to offend the Radiant Saint Hall on the Desolate Plain? That's correct. There is basically no one who is willing to provoke an organization with a god artifact like that across the entire Saint's world, let alone on a single plane. However, the Tower of Radiance has lost its artifact spirit, unfortunately. Tianyun explained to Jianchen. He had been in the Saint's world for so long, so his understanding of the Tower of Radiance was obviously greater than the sword spirits. Speaking of which, the Radiant Saint Hall is actually one of the lengthiest lineages in the Saint's world's history. It has existed through 2 eons at the very least, and the Tower of Radiance was forged by a supreme expert who had reached a level akin to Grand Exalt's 2 eons ago. But throughout the glorious history of the Radiant Saint Hall, the Tower of Radiance has experienced several great battles. In the last battle, the Tower of Radiance was finally heavily damaged, and the artifact spirit died during that battle. As a result, the Tower of Radiance has only become a safe place to store records now. It has no other use. Tianyun's explanation allowed Jianchen to gain a brand new understanding of the Radiant Saint Hall. However, he also experienced doubts at the same time. He asked out of confusion, "Hasn't anyone refined the Tower of Radiance after that? And why has the Tower of Radiance only become a place to store records? Can't people hide in it when they encounter powerful enemies?" The Tower of Radiance seems to be rather special. According to my understanding, probably only the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall, who can directly come in contact with the secrets of the Tower of Radiance, knows why no one has been able to refine the Tower of Radiance, said Tianyun. Moreover, the Tower of Radiance isn't as simple as you think it is. When the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance passed away, its residual regrets filled every inch of the Tower of Radiance. All the hallowed saint masters that enter the Tower of Radiance have to endure the pressure from this regret at all times. Without enough strength, it's impossible to remain in there for long. Even radiant god kings will struggle to stay in there for a year. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.